Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. French television producer Sophie Toscan de Plantier was brutally murdered in December 1996 outside her vacation home in West Cork, Ireland. Although the investigation got off to a good start, the case ultimately ended because the police were misled by false witness statements. No one has been held responsible for her untimely death, even after all this time. What went wrong in this well-publicized investigation, and why does Sophie's murder continue to plague her family and the neighborhood? Let's investigate the specifics of this enduring enigma. On July 28, 1957, Sophie Toscan du Plantier was born in Boulogne-Billancourt. She was born into a wealthy French family that appreciated the arts and raised in the energetic city of Paris. She developed an early interest in the film industry and later became a television producer. She wed Daniel Toscan du Plantier, a well-known figure in French cinema, in 1991. They became a vibrant couple and reared Sophie's teenage son Pierre-Louis from her first marriage. He had a particular place in her heart because he was her only child. They had a close relationship based on mutual respect and trust. Sophie made it a point to be actively involved in his life, from supporting him at events to helping with school projects. They loved spending time together, whether it was traveling around Paris or hosting comfortable movie evenings at home. Sophie's and her husband's lives were frequently in the spotlight in the busy city of Paris, where they both worked in the film industry. Sophie's tenacity was apparent in all she did. She put a lot of effort into achieving her goals. Young and fervent, Sophie never let anyone discredit her aspirations or goals. She pursued her profession while upholding her moral principles because she firmly believed in justice. Pierre-Louis, who saw his mother as a role model, was among those who admired her bravery and strength. Every day he was inspired by her tenacity and resolve, and their relationship gave them both strength to handle the difficulties of life in the spotlight. But the bustle of the city might be too much to handle. Sophie frequently fled to Schull, a quiet village on Ireland's west coast, in search of tranquility. Even though the surroundings were serene, Sophie was unaware that this would be her final journey. Schull, which has a population of only 700, is renowned for its breathtaking landscapes and welcoming community. Attracted by the serene waters and striking cliffs, artists and writers congregate here to find inspiration. After making multiple trips to Ireland as a teenager, Sophie bought a cottage in Toormore in 1993, which she used as a vacation getaway. Her maiden name, Munoz, was well known among the locals. Sophie arrived alone in Ireland on December 20, 1996. She couldn't wait to spend Christmas in her comfortable cottage in Dunmanus, West Cork. She used this small sanctuary as a place to unwind and rejuvenate after a long day of work in Paris. Sophie fell in love with the local charm as soon as she arrived. She ran errands at the village shops and talked to her amiable neighbors. Since they had known her since she was a young girl, the locals gave her a warm welcome. She felt at home in the stunning scenery and cool winter air. But beneath the quiet, a horrible event was on the horizon. A tragedy that would permanently alter the close-knit community was set to upend the tranquil days. Nobody could have predicted Sophie's fate in this peaceful region of Ireland. Shirley Foster, a neighbor, sadly called the police on the morning of December 23. She had witnessed a horrific scene, a corpse outside her neighbor's house. The scene was startling, and it was a cold morning. The victim, who was later identified as Sophie, was seen by the Irish police or Gardaí when they arrived. It was difficult to immediately identify her because of the severe damage to her face. She was wearing a comfortable dressing gown over her pajamas, but her boots were still on, as though she had gone outside for a little while, maybe to breathe. It became evident that the blood-stained concrete block next to her might be the weapon used against her. Along the path to the back door, where the keys were still stuck in the lock, and on the gate, blood was also discovered. Everything inside the house appeared normal. 2 wine glasses were left unattended on the drying rack. Whatever had occurred seemed to have happened outside in the bitter cold. She was attacked shortly after leaving the pub, most likely in the early hours of December 23, according to forensic experts. Given how violently she died, there were immediate concerns about the attack's motivation. The small village of Schul and beyond were rocked by the discovery of Sophie Toscan Duplantier's body. A once tranquil location swiftly became a crime scene, garnering significant media coverage from France and Ireland. It was a difficult task for investigators to piece together the circumstances surrounding her death while the public and media watched closely. Together with forensic teams, local law enforcement stepped in an effort to locate any forensic evidence that could aid in identifying Sophie's killer. They painstakingly gathered evidence from the scene. In an attempt to create a timeline for Sophie's final hours, investigators spoke with locals and customers at the local pub. But their task was made even more difficult by the lack of immediate suspects. Early on in the investigation, one of the major problems surfaced. It took 28 hours after the body was found for Dr. John Harbison, the state pathologist, to reach the scene. Due to this considerable delay, important evidence may have been contaminated or washed away by the rainy weather. This sparked questions about the police investigation and whether it would result in answers or remain unsolved. The Gardaí came under fire for improperly managing evidence during this period. While in their custody, a number of items, including a blood-stained gate, disappeared. More questions were raised, even though they later stated that the gate was thrown away because it wasn't useful as evidence. Although the police investigation was poorly managed, an investigative report found no evidence of high-level corruption. Public concerns were heightened by the fact that the investigation's records had been altered and that some pages were missing. The results of the final examination of Sophie's body were unsettling. She had fought back, as evidenced by the numerous defense wounds and scratches on her hands. She had also taken severe hits to her face and back of her head, leaving her hardly recognizable. Unfortunately, it was impossible to pinpoint the exact moment of her death because her body had been exposed to the cold for so long. Clarity was scarce at the actual crime scene. There were no signs of a struggle inside the cottage, except for some blood traces on the back door and gate. Sophie appeared to have gone outside for a specific purpose because she was wearing her boots over her pajamas. The keys left in the back door suggested that she may have gone outside for a moment, or that someone in the kitchen may have trapped her there. On the counter were 2 wine glasses. They could have been used by Sophie the day before, so their presence did not prove that someone else had been in the cottage. In general, there weren't many hints left at the scene. Only one blood sample from the collection was found to be unrelated to Sophie. Although DNA testing was still in its infancy at the time, it turned out to be the investigators' only meaningful lead. Given the scant evidence, the police started tracking Sophie's whereabouts ever since she moved into the cottage. By contacting local businesses and talking to anyone who might have seen her, they attempted to piece together her last days. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that finding answers would be difficult. The small village of Schul was rocked by Sophie's murder. The fact that a married mother was murdered just before Christmas added to the shock of the first murder in almost a century. The locals couldn't believe such violence could occur in their peaceful neighborhood. The villagers gathered to grieve and support one another, and they stayed up to pray in Sophie's honor. This sad incident sparked important conversations about safety, particularly for women, and the value of being vigilant even in quiet rural communities. The media significantly influenced public perception of the case as the investigation went on. There was a moral panic brought on by the coverage. The murder of Sophie was widely covered by the media as a change from a multicultural safe village to one that is now afraid. Crazy theories about what transpired were frequently included in the stories. Others offered strange theories, such as the idea that Sophie was killed by a horse, while others conjectured about French hitmen. 2 London-based crime podcasters made the decision to delve deeply into the case and produced a multi-episode series that attracted the interest of major networks like Netflix and Sky Atlantic. This renewed interest sparked crucial conversations about how crimes against women were portrayed in the media and the necessity of responsible reporting, even though these documentaries frequently concentrated on sensational elements and the question of who did it. For researchers, these developments brought up 2 important questions. First, how closely did the sensationalized stories that frequently accompany cases of violence against women resemble the recent media coverage of Sophie's case? There was also the question of whether documentaries and podcasts could offer a more serious examination of these crimes, going beyond sensationalism. Some important details that helped tell her story were discovered by the police as they investigated her last days. Sophie was seen shopping and chatting with amiable locals in Schul the day after she arrived. One store owner saw something strange. Sophie was being watched intently by a man wearing a black coat and hat while she was shopping, and he followed her after she left. Sophie made the decision to walk to 3 Castlehead the night before her body was found. The ruins of Dunlough Castle can be seen along this lovely track, which also offers breathtaking views. A local legend about the White Lady, the ghost of a bride who tragically threw herself off a cliff, is another reason for its notoriety. When people saw her, they assumed that something horrible was going to occur. Sophie said she saw the White Lady while out for a walk. She later told her friends about this terrifying experience, even admitting that the idea of having met a ghost frightened her. She returned to a nearby pub for tea after seeing her friends, where she engaged in conversation with the locals. Although it seemed like a typical evening, nobody could have predicted how it would turn out. Daniel, Sophie's husband, was in Paris when she last spoke to him. Around midnight, they received a phone call that was probably full of love and encouragement, but a horrible thing happened after that call. Sophie was murdered sometime between midnight and the time her neighbor discovered her. This demonstrated how urgent and intricate it is to comprehend the events leading up to her terrible destiny. Daniel Toscan, Sophie Toscan Duplantier's husband, was the first person the police looked at as a suspect in her murder. Sophie had learned that Daniel was having an affair, and the couple had made the decision to split up. Strangely enough, Sophie had recently made the decision to break up with the man she was seeing. To alleviate the stress of her separation, she decided to spend the holidays by herself in Schul prior to her trip. Daniel and Sophie's lover were in France on the evening of December 22, not in Ireland. There was a lot of gossip in the little town of Schul as the police started their investigation. People in the area thought that tourists might have been involved in Sophie's murder. But according to the police, the murderer was probably a local who knew the routes to her isolated cottage. Police continued their investigation, concentrating on a man named Ian Bailey, who was born in Manchester, England. Ian was born on January 27, 1957, and in the early 1990s, he relocated to Ireland. He sought a more tranquil life after a challenging divorce and worked as a freelance journalist, occasionally publishing under the name Ian Bailey. In addition, he worked on fish farms and had a market stand where he sold poetry and pizza. From 1992 on, Ian and his partner Jules Thomas resided in Goleen. Despite his enjoyment of life in Schul, he was perceived by many residents as conceited and intrusive. The couple hurried to the crime scene to collect information for a story after learning that Sophie's body had been discovered on December 23, 23 p.m. Ian was adamant about writing about the murder, the first in Schul in a century, even though the police advised them not to divulge any information. Sophie's tragedy garnered international media attention because she was a well-known person. Ian started writing about Sophie's relationships and other aspects of her life. According to the article Sophie's Tangled Love Life, she had been inviting different men to her cottage. Sophie's family promptly made it clear that she was only seeing one man, and that they had broken up with him prior to her trip. This clarification caught investigators' attention and sparked additional rumors. Some neighbors insisted they had met Sophie, despite Ian's claim that he didn't know her well. He persisted in speculating that Daniel was responsible for the murder, implying that he did so to protect himself from financial loss in their divorce. The violent nature of the crime, according to the police, did not align with this theory. A crucial piece of information was revealed on January 11th. At 3 in the morning, an unidentified caller claimed to have seen a man at a bridge close to Sophie's home. December 23. He wore a black coat and hat just like the man a store owner had seen on December 21 after Sophie. The shop owner, Marie Farrell, turned out to be the source of the tip. Because she was at the bridge with another man and didn't want her husband to find out, she had filed an anonymous report. Police named the man as Ian Bailey and made him the primary suspect based on her description and other witness statements. Ian had scratches on his face and arms when he was interviewed a few days after the murder. These came from cutting down a Christmas tree, he explained. His injuries could not be inspected later because no photos were taken of them. Ian named him a suspect and implied that Sophie's ex-husband had hired a hitman, but police believed a local person was responsible for the crime. Despite keeping a close eye on him, they were unable to present a compelling case. Ian Bailey was taken into custody by the police on February 10, 1997, in order to establish a solid case. Police discovered evidence of a fire in his yard when they searched his house. Ian said the fire had occurred earlier in December, but a neighbor had reported seeing smoke coming from his house a few days after the murder. There was no evidence at his house or studio that connected him to Sophie's murder, according to the police. Jules Thomas, Ian's partner, was also taken into custody and interrogated. She claimed that after spending the night of the murder at a nearby pub with Ian, they drove to a vantage point where they could see that Sophie's and the neighbors' homes had lights on. However, Jules stated that he woke up in the middle of the night because of work, whereas Ian stated that he slept through the entire night. Ian lied and claimed to have gone to his studio when he was questioned about this. It was not until 9 a.m. that Jules saw him the following morning and saw what she believed to be a previous wound on his face. But there wasn't much evidence against him. Blood traces discovered at the scene were highly contaminated and did not match anyone. The timeline was made more difficult by the cold, and important pieces of evidence, like the gate from Sophie's house, which also contained blood traces, had been lost. After reviewing the case, the Director of Public Prosecutions was unable to formally charge Ian. There was no solid evidence linking him to the crime scene, even though he was detained for 12 hours and insisted on his innocence. He was consequently set free. Ian was furious because he felt he was losing control of the story when the media started to name him the primary suspect. His mental state appeared to deteriorate as the investigation went on. People said they saw him carrying a stick he said had magical powers, or howling at the moon. A condition known as howling at the moon occurs when someone expends time and energy attempting to accomplish an impossible task or obtain an unachievable goal. Some neighbors even claimed that Ian had confessed to killing Sophie as more information surfaced, but they later claimed it was just dark humor. Ian was arrested once more on January 27, 1998, in the hope that he would eventually confess because the police believed he had evidence against him. But nothing had changed, and the evidence was almost completely gone. Ian was again released without formal charges. The way the police handled the investigation drew harsh criticism once more. After his second arrest, he invited the media to his house to denounce the media frenzy surrounding him and to claim his innocence, despite the fact that many people thought he was guilty. He gave the police samples of his and his partner's hair. No new evidence emerged, and the case cooled off after 2 unsuccessful attempts to coerce a confession. Ian lost his defamation lawsuit against multiple media outlets in 2003. Police files were made public as a result of this loss, which only increased public suspicion that he was involved in Sophie's murder. The main witness, Marie Farrell, testified during the trial that she saw Ian close to the crime scene. He threatened to change her statement, she said. It was also revealed that Ian and his partner had a tumultuous relationship, which included past instances of domestic abuse. The public saw Ian as a violent man, despite Jules' defense. Ian was going to be charged after losing the defamation trial, it seemed. He would not be charged, though, as the Director of Public Prosecutions determined that there was not enough evidence to connect him to the crime scene. Dissatisfied with this result, Sophie's family wanted Ian to be charged in France, where the law permitted charges based on circumstantial evidence. Since there was not enough evidence to deport Ian from Ireland, they asked in 2008 that all files be moved to the French legal system so that he could stand trial. In a shocking turn of events, Marie Farrell withdrew her statement during the trial, 10 years after she had initially made it. Marie claimed that although she had seen a man the night of the murder, she had lied about who he was because the police had pressured her to do so. She emphasized that her initial testimony was false and clarified that Ian Bailey had never threatened her. This retraction revealed a number of issues with the inquiry. It demonstrated how the case had been impacted by biases in law enforcement's approach, the loss of crucial evidence, and police misconduct. These problems cast doubt on the veracity of the testimony used against Ian, as well as the integrity of the investigation. The Association for the Truth was established in 2007 by Sophie's family to advance the investigation. Ian Bailey's deportation was authorized by the Irish High Court after a French magistrate issued a European arrest warrant for him in February 2010. In March 2012, Bailey filed an appeal with the Supreme Court. The French government did not plan to try him at the time, according to the Supreme Court's decision in his favor. Furthermore, because the alleged offense took place outside of French territory and there was inadequate cooperation, 4 of the 5 judges concurred that the European arrest warrant stopped his deportation. Ian filed a lawsuit against the Irish government in November 2014, claiming that they were unfairly singled out for Sophie's murder. Marie Farrell's withheld statements were to be used by his legal team as evidence that the police had influenced him. She would not, however, reveal the identity of the man she had been with that evening when she was asked to testify. Ian lost the lawsuit as a result of this lack of credibility, which seriously hurt his case. Additionally, it was discovered that phone conversations at Garda stations had been surreptitiously recorded that same year. This sparked worries that there may have been anomalies in the abandoned Garda station's recordings of the Sophie murder investigation. 297 recorded calls pertaining to the case were reviewed by the Fennelly Commission. The commission discovered evidence that suggested the Gardaí had thought about deleting or changing evidence that could have cleared Ian Bailey. It came to the conclusion, though, that there was no evidence that they truly did this. The commission also pointed out that the Gardaí had improperly given journalists and other civilians access to private information regarding the investigation. In order to clear his name, Ian Bailey wrote to the Director of Public Prosecutions in 2016 and asked for a trial in Ireland. However, this did not occur. A European arrest warrant issued by French authorities, who wanted to deport him to stand trial for the murder of Sophie Toscan de Plantier, led to his arrest in Ireland in March 2017. The warrant was granted by the Irish High Court, but Bailey managed to evade extradition. Despite Ian's absence, a French court determined in 2018 that there was sufficient evidence to hold a trial. As a result, a trial without Ian started in France in 2019. Because there was no jury, only 3 judges, and more than 30 witnesses, the trial was unusual. A Paris court found Bailey guilty of murder on May 31, 2019, and he was given a 25-year prison term. An arrest warrant was issued for Europe. He was permitted to stay in Ireland after the High Court of Ireland decided there was not enough evidence to deport him. Following that, Ian Bailey was prohibited from leaving Ireland for fear of being arrested and deported to France if he traveled to another European nation. A specialized Irish police unit declared in the summer of 2022 that Sophie's case would be thoroughly examined. Ian Bailey passed away outside his Bantry home on January 21, 2024 at the age of 66, following a suspected cardiac arrest. Due to his history of domestic violence against his partner, which resulted in her hospitalization in 2001, his life was tainted by controversy. In Shull District Court, he was found guilty of assault. According to a psychiatrist's report, he exhibited aggressive and egocentric conduct, particularly when under the influence of alcohol. In order to fill the profound void left by his mother's absence, Sophie's son Pierre-Louis continues to visit Shull. Her death still hurts 25 years later, and he still finds it hard to move on from this tragic period of his life and find closure if the case is not resolved. One of the most well-known unresolved cases in Irish history is the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. Complicated witness statements and her family's intense grief have complicated the investigation. The pursuit of justice feels far from over, even with the appearance of fresh leads. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This story occurred in 2002. During her summer vacation in Kansas, 19-year-old Alexandra Kemp, also known as Allie Kemp, worked at an outdoor swimming pool. Her brother also worked there, but on different shifts. When he arrived at work one day and was unable to locate his sister, he contacted his father. The guy couldn't believe Allie was closer than he thought. Alexandra Elizabeth Kemp was born on October 11, 1982, in Lawood, Kansas, which is on the border with Missouri. She was the eldest of 3 children and her parents' only daughter. Alexandra graduated from high school with honors and attended Kansas State University. She had big life plans, including taking a trip in 2002. After finishing her first year of university, she returned to Leawood for her summer vacation. There was an outdoor swimming pool close to her parents' house. Her younger brother, Tyler, works there. Alexandra, too, decided to work part-time over the summer to supplement her income. It was not a busy place. The pool was primarily intended for the neighborhood's residents. By the way, this pool is still operational as of June 18, 2002. Alexandra was at work. The day was cloudy, so there were fewer visitors than usual. Tyler arrived at the pool around 5 p.m. to start his shift, but his sister was not present. Her phone and purse were on the table, where she usually sat. Confused, Tyler called his parents and informed them that Alexandra had disappeared. Their father, Roger Kemp, rushed to the scene. The first thing he did was look in the pool. Roger exhaled with relief as the pool was empty. Roger then went to a small pump room near the pool, which contained various water purification equipment, a ladder, and other items. Once inside, the man looked around but saw nothing suspicious. But then he noticed a leg sticking out from beneath the tarp. Running up and lifting the tarp, Roger saw his daughter brutally beaten. She was naked from the waist down, with numerous bruises on her face and body. The man immediately dialed 911. While speaking with the operator, he cried and begged Alexandra not to abandon him. When the ambulance arrived, Roger was administering CPR to his daughter. They transported the girl to the hospital. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, Alexandra did not survive. She was pronounced dead immediately after arriving at the hospital. Alexandra died from strangulation, despite having suffered numerous severe injuries. Although her body was partially naked, experts discovered no evidence of someone forcing her into intimacy before her death. The police cordoned off the pool while they awaited the results of an analysis of the DNA samples taken from Alexandra's body, hoping to find clues that would help them identify the perpetrator. There were obvious signs of a struggle in the room where Roger discovered Alexandra's body. Her flip-flops were in 2 different locations. The police also discovered an open antiseptic gel with a cap inside. A few days later, while police were desperately searching for the perpetrator, Alexandra's family and hundreds of caring people said their goodbyes at a funeral ceremony. The first suspect was Phil Howes, whom Alexandra had been dating since high school. Phil also worked as the pool administrator. Alexandra died while working the morning shift, and Alexandra arrived at noon. Her shift was scheduled to last 5 hours. Phil used to stay after work to spend more time with his girlfriend Alexandra, but this time he left immediately after his shift because they had planned an evening date. As previously stated, Alexandra's brother arrived at work to find her already under a tarp in the pump room. However, Phil had a solid alibi, so the police quickly removed him from the suspect list. Speaking with detectives, he stated that Alexandra disliked being alone. Lawnmowers frequently stared at her and attempted to flirt with her. The police interrogated the mowers, but all of the men had an alibi. However, it was not an absolute dead end. Several men reported seeing a strange man sitting in the bushes with a video camera, liking the girls in swimsuits. They saw this man near the pool the day before Alexandra died. Furthermore, someone claimed that he left in an old Ford pickup truck to investigate the activity on the girl's mobile phone. Experts discovered that she communicated with a friend named Laurel on the day she died. They even agreed to meet, and Laurel reported to the police station for questioning. She told investigators that Alexandra invited her to sit with her until her shift ended. The weather that day was not ideal, so no one came to the pool, which made Alexandra feel better. According to Laurel, she arrived at the pool around 2:30 p.m. I parked a few yards from the fence, but Alexandra wasn't present. Laurel began honking, hoping that Alexandra would respond to the sound, but instead of her friend, she saw a man emerge from the pool house. The latter gave her a smile and waved. Laurel was unfamiliar with this man. She assumed it was Alexandra's boss and decided to leave so as not to cause any additional problems for her friend. At the time, she believed Alexandra would be in trouble if the boss discovered she was talking to friends during work hours. But that man was not Alexandra's supervisor or co-worker. The police were almost certain that Laurel had seen the criminal based on her description of the forensic artist's sketch of the suspect. The police were looking for a 30-year-old white man with stocky build, short brown hair, and driving a Ford pickup truck from 1980. The authorities received numerous clues. One person stated that the man named James was straight, looked very similar to the suspect's sketch, drove an old Ford pickup truck, and worked as a mechanic about 20 minutes away from the pool. When the police found the man and took him to the station, they were astounded by his resemblance to the sketch based on Laurel's description. James denied being involved in Alexandra Kemp's death. The man's employer confirmed his alibi, stating that James was at work on the day Alexandra died. As a result, they let go more directly. Meanwhile, the police received a report from the laboratory, which revealed male DNA on a tube of antiseptic gel found at the crime scene and on Alexandra's body. However, it was ineffective because the police discovered no matches in the databases when they searched for these samples. Alexandra's friends, family, and boyfriend were officially excluded from the suspect list because their DNA did not match the DNA samples discovered on her body. Alexandra's father, Roger Kemp, was the driving force behind this investigation. Losing his beloved daughter stripped him of the meaning of life, but he regained it by setting himself the goal of finding the person who killed Alexandra. In an interview, Roger stated that you have two choices: stay in bed and pull the blanket over your head, or go out and fight. I decided to fight. Roger's perseverance and tenacity impressed the police department, so he was given his own space at the police station, where he collected all of the information he received and shared potential leads with the investigation. After reviewing all available clues, Roger and the investigators contacted the producers of the television show America's Most Wanted and requested that an episode about Alexandra's death be produced. The creators agreed. It was once the longest-running television show, lasting 24 seasons. After the Alexandra story aired, the police began receiving hundreds of calls containing information. They investigated all the clues, but none of them led to a breakthrough. The investigation ended in a dead end. In February 2003, 8 months after Alexandra died, there was a new, seemingly solid clue. As a result of the search activity, a man has been arrested in Utah. They received 3 statements about this person over a span of several days. 2 women and a 114-year-old girl who are unrelated to each other told the police that a man forced them into intimacy. The criminal fled, but was eventually apprehended in Utah. This man turned out to be James Strader, the same man the Kansas police had previously interrogated. Strader's facial features were very similar to the sketch of the suspect. For some reason, no one collected his DNA sample at the time. Perhaps no one did this because Strader's boss convinced the police that he was at work on the day of the crime and had not left. Everyone thought the Alexandra Kemp case was about to be resolved, but Strader denied any involvement in her death. He admitted that he looked very similar to the suspect's portrait, but claimed he had not been by the pool that day. He provided a DNA sample for analysis. However, the outcome disappointed everyone. His DNA did not match that found on Alexandra's body, and the antiseptic gel tube ended up in prison on unrelated charges, and the Alexandra Kemp case investigation was once again stalled. Alexandra died a year ago and the police still have no suspects. Roger Kemp and Phil House, the man Alexandra was dating, continued their fight for justice. Phil, president of the student community, distributed the suspect's portrait via email to students at other universities. He also requested that students at other educational institutions watch an episode of America's Most Wanted featuring Alexandra Kemp. However, despite the best efforts of her relatives and the police, nothing was accomplished. Another year has passed. Roger Kemp refused to give up and continued to fight for justice for his daughter. He contacted America's Most Wanted again, this time requesting that the episode about Alexandra's death be rerun. When the creators asked Roger if there was any new information in the case, he replied, "No such determination of a father who lost his daughter impressed the show's creators. Therefore, the episode was shown again." Following that, the police received a high volume of calls. Roger offered a $25,000 reward for any information that could help identify the person who killed Alexandra. The city of Leawood increased it to $50,000. Roger also published an image of his daughter's sketch of the suspects along with information about the reward in newspapers. One day, he was driving down the highway and noticed the billboards. At that point, Roger realized that a billboard was an excellent way to draw attention. He began calling advertising agencies to see how much it would cost to place the necessary information on one of the billboards. One of the agencies Roger contacted was Lamar Advertising Company. When the company's owner learned that Roger Kemp wanted to rent a billboard, he refused to take his money. Instead, he told him that he could post information for free on multiple billboards. Roger decided to post a sketch of the suspect and information about the reward on billboards near one of the state's busiest highways. The police received hundreds of clues that took time to investigate. At the same time, some clues referred to the same man. Two unrelated individuals reported on Teddy Hoover, the owner of an old Ford pickup truck. The man worked in pool maintenance and resembles the suspect sketch. This many matches could not be a coincidence. So the police began looking for a man named Teddy Hoover. They found out his address in Kansas and went there right away. Hoover opened the door. He was surprised and visibly nervous, but it was not his fault. Many people become nervous when the police knock on their door. They inquired about his whereabouts on June 18, 2002. As expected, the man responded that he couldn't remember because it had been 2 years. Few people will recall where they were on a specific day several years ago. Hoover also denied any involvement in the pool's maintenance, where Alexandra worked. Nonetheless, the detectives asked him to voluntarily provide a sample of his DNA in order to eliminate him from the list of suspects. Hoover responded that he needed to consult a lawyer before proceeding. He stated that he would call the police himself after consulting with a lawyer. About a day later, Hoover's lawyer contacted investigators, stating that his client was concerned about his sample ending up in the database. Teddy allegedly believed in a variety of conspiracy theories. In other words, he believed the police would use it against him. In other cases, the investigators promised not to enter Hoover's DNA into any database and would only compare it to the DNA found on Alexandra Kemp. The lawyer said he'd speak with his client and call back, while waiting for a call. The police searched through the materials for the 100th time and discovered a piece of paper with a familiar name in one of the folders. On the day Alexandra died, detectives interviewed bystanders gathered by the pool, hoping to learn if they had witnessed anything suspicious. Ted Hoover was one of the people the police spoke with by the pool. It indicated that he was at the crime scene. Despite his claim that he had never been there, the police became increasingly convinced that Ted Hoover was the man they had been looking for 2 years. After several days of waiting, the investigators contacted Hoover's lawyer and asked if his client was willing to provide a sample of his DNA. The lawyer's response surprised the investigators. The man stated that his client refused his services and stopped contacting him. Police immediately went to Hoover's house, but their main suspect had already escaped. They added the 29-year-old man to the National Wanted list. However, he was able to cover his tracks quite successfully. Billboards featuring the suspect's image remained in place, and detectives had been searching for Hoover for months without success. In September 2004, a man called the police and claimed to have information about the suspect. He claimed to know the name of Teddy's girlfriend, with whom he lived in Kansas. Detectives decided to identify this woman, but they discovered that she left the state around the same time that Hoover fled. The woman's name was Laura Barr, and the U.S. Postal Service informed the Kansas State Police that she was receiving mail in Litchfield, Connecticut. A man named Benjamin Appleby also received mail at that address. The house where they lived was in a remote rural area. The police were certain that Benjamin Appleby was either a pseudonym or Teddy Hoover's real name. In 1997, detectives contacted the Connecticut State Police and asked them to assist in the search for Appleby. The man had legal issues in Connecticut, and a warrant for his arrest was issued. The man exposed himself in front of a schoolgirl. However, Benjamin fled the state, and the police were unable to locate him. With an arrest warrant, the detectives went to Benjamin Appleby's mail delivery address. They discovered the man at home and arrested him immediately, as the Kansas detectives suspected Benjamin Appleby and Teddy Hoover were the same person. In 1997, Appleby got into legal trouble in Connecticut. He fled the state and lived as Teddy Hoover. But when detectives in Kansas wanted a sample of his DNA to determine his involvement in Alexandra Kemp's death, he returned to Connecticut, began living under his real name, and attempted to maintain a low profile, assuming that everyone had forgotten about his wrongdoings. Appleby refused extradition to Kansas, so the Leawood detectives traveled to Connecticut, assuming he will again declare his innocence. The detectives tricked him. Before bringing the man to the interrogation room, they hung crime scene photos, as well as Alexandra and Appleby's pictures, and placed folders on the table with his name on them. The police went to great lengths to give him the impression that the investigation was thorough. When the man arrived in the interrogation room, he was speechless. One of the detectives inquired, "What do you think will happen after we get a sample of your DNA?" Appleby burst into tears and claimed responsibility for Alexandra's death. He recounted the events of the cloudy June day. Benjamin noticed Alexandra, and she appeared attractive. He decided to hit on her, and when she entered the pump room, he followed her and locked the door, preventing her from leaving. Appleby touched the girl, and she hit him back. He beat and strangled her out of humiliation. Alexandra lost consciousness, and Appleby decided to satisfy his lust by partially undressing her. He took a tube of antiseptic gel from the first aid kit and intended to use it as a lubricant. Alexandra's friend, who was sitting in the car behind the fence and beeping, stopped him from carrying out his plan. He was afraid of being caught red-handed, so he covered his body and left the room. When he saw Alexandra's friend, he smiled and waved. Then he got into his pickup truck and drove off. A few hours later, he returned to the crime scene and joined the crowd of onlookers gathered by the pool. The DNA analysis confirmed that the DNA found on the gel tube and Alexandra's body belonged to Benjamin Appleby. Thus, after more than 2 years, and largely due to Roger Kemp's efforts, the police discovered the man who killed Alexandra. Appleby told investigators that he was willing to fully admit guilt in order to quickly close the case and spare Alexandra's family from another emotional ordeal. But at the first court hearing, he declared his innocence, claiming that he confessed under pressure. You can say a lot, but disputing the DNA analysis is pointless. There was only one DNA sample on the victim's body, which belonged to Benjamin Appleby. Realizing this, his lawyers attempted to persuade the court that their client had no intention of killing Alexander. They said Benjamin admitted to killing Alexandra Kemp, but denied doing so on purpose. However, forensic experts reminded everyone that the criminal had been strangling the girl for approximately 10 minutes. He could have stopped, but chose not to. According to the prosecution, he came to the pool for one reason: to watch her. Unfortunately, on June 18, 2002, the pool was cloudy and empty. Appleby took advantage of the situation. In December of 2005, a jury found him guilty. The court sentenced him to life in prison with the option of petitioning for parole after 50 years. He received an additional 19 years for attempting to force her into intimacy. Appleby appealed the court's decision in 2019, and his life sentence for first-degree deprivation of life was upheld. The Court of Appeal ruled that an attempt to establish intimacy with Alexandra was considered when the first sentence was passed. Thus, Appleby was sentenced twice for the same crime. Based on this, the court reversed the second conviction. Even if released on parole, Appleby will be 81 years old at the time. The investigators admitted that Roger Kemp's perseverance helped them find the criminal. When Appleby was in prison, Roger and his wife started a self-defense class for girls, through which tens of thousands of girls and women across the country learned basic self-defense techniques. Billboards were not a new concept in 1991. Following the death by strangulation of 34-year-old Kathy Page, her father began placing billboards criticizing the police, and this story inspired the filmmakers. 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. However, after Roger Kemp posted a sketch of the suspect on billboards, people began using this method across the country. Furthermore, many people continue to use it today. Roger's persistence in the investigation, as well as his subsequent efforts to benefit society, were not unnoticed. At the White House, he received the Presidential Citizens Medal from President Barack Obama. Roger Kemp, 77, passed away on March 1, 2022. Until his death, he worked for a foundation named after his daughter. He stated that he would consider his efforts successful if they saved at least one person. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Today we'll look at a case involving a very unusual plot that occurred in London in 2011. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass's bodies were discovered in a house near Heathrow Airport. They were both 20 years old. The investigators working on this case will describe it as one of the most unusual for someone who works full-time in law enforcement. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass worked for the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. Alice was a local, and her family home was approximately 6 miles from the hotel where she worked. She had started the job 3 weeks earlier and had made friends with other hotel employees, particularly her peer Tibor Vass. Tibor was born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, He was his parents' second child, and he had a younger sister, Tibor, who enjoyed being around other people. He could play almost any musical instrument, with the piano being his favorite. He taught his sister Isabella how to play the piano, and they sang and played together while their parents listened. His mother Rosalia struggled to move on after his father died unexpectedly in 2007. Tibor spent the majority of his free time with his sister. He was both her brother and father. He wanted to share his mother's burden, so he started working full-time when he was 15 years old. In 2008, he applied to the University of Budapest, hoping that a college degree would help him get a good job and better support his mother. Despite his exceptional abilities, he was denied admission to the university. Tibor discussed with his mother the possibility of moving to Great Britain and finding work there. Tibor's mother must have supported the idea, as he moved to the United Kingdom in July 2010. At the age of 19, he relocated to London. He began working at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. He enjoyed his job, his responsibilities, the people he worked with, and the new clients he met each day. Alice was an accomplished musician who quickly bonded with Tibor. They never ran out of topics to discuss. Tibor Vass and Alice Adams were the hotel's receptionists. Another receptionist was Attila Ban, who was 31 years old. Attila had been with the hotel the longest of the three, and he was named the best employee in 2010. Both Attila and Tibor were from Hungary, which brought them closer together. The hotel provided company apartments to its new employees. Attila and Tibor lived in a house behind the hotel. It was extremely convenient. On the one hand, it was more cost-effective. On the other hand, you did not have to spend much time getting to work. Despite Tibor's happiness to be in England, he did not abandon his plans to pursue higher education. He applied again to Budapest University, and this time he was accepted. He was very happy, but he had to return to Hungary in August 2011. Tibor's departure was marked by a small farewell party, which was held on August 9, 2011. Other hotel employees attended the party alongside Tibor, Attila, and Alice. The next day, this trio was supposed to work, but none of them showed up. Colleagues raised the alarm when they failed to arrive for work at 7 a.m. The police were notified at 7 a.m. The police were notified at 7:53 a.m. The police arrived at the house and knocked on the door. No one opened the door, and everything was quiet inside. The door was unlocked. When one of the officers opened it, he discovered a terrifying sight. Alice lay on the living room floor, her face hidden by a pillow. Later, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy found 22 stab wounds on her body. The naked body of the man who had died from stab wounds to the heart lay on the bed in his bedroom. The killer was nowhere to be found. The police cordoned off the house, and investigators and forensic experts quickly began their work. When investigators examined the crime scene, they discovered that the bed on which Tibor lay was not where he died. It was too clean. The perpetrator had wounded him elsewhere before removing his clothes, cleaning him up and placing him on the bed. Alcohol bottles and illegal substances, which appeared to have been consumed at the party, were discovered in the apartment. Police officers searched the house, the surrounding area, and the attic but found no Attila bands. His personal belongings, including his papers, remained inside the apartment. As Attila became the prime suspect, investigators began interviewing his co-workers while experts worked the crime scene. Hotel employees claimed that as soon as Tibor started working at the hotel, Attila took him under his wing because they were both from the same country. It wasn't long before Attila asked Tibor to live with him in an apartment near the hotel. He even planned his work schedule so that they worked the same shift. Tibor was young and attractive, and he received plenty of female attention. The problem was that prior to falling in love with Tibor, Ban made no secret of his preference for male relationships. According to the hotel staff, Tibor rejected his advances, which made him unhappy. Alice had taken a job at the hotel 3 weeks before her death, and Tibor began to show interest in her, which naturally irritated Attila, who was jealous despite knowing Tibor was only interested in women. Investigators began to wonder if Attila had committed the crime out of jealousy and unrequited love. Even before police discovered Tibor Vass and Alice Adams' lifeless bodies, Bain had posted an ominous message on his Facebook page. He wrote, "I want to wake up from that nightmare." This was posted at 6:23 a.m., and several friends expressed their concerns, to which they received no response. The message convinced investigators that Attila Ban was involved in his colleagues' deaths. This was also demonstrated by the number of wounds. Alice was stabbed 22 times and Tibor twice. In addition, Alice was lying on the floor with a pillow against her face, while Tibor was on the bed. The investigators interviewed the other party members, who stated that when everyone left, only Attila T., Boher, and Alice remained in the apartment. This indicated that something had occurred between these three people in the time remaining before dawn. Alice and T. Boers' deaths were reported to their families. What happened was devastating for both the Adams and Vass families. In a statement released by the Adams family, Alice's mother, Sarah, honored her daughter with the words, "My heart is broken, and my life will be forever tinged with sadness. I miss Alice so much. I'd give anything for one more Alice squeezy hug and smile. Alice's death has caused my family to experience extreme emotions such as grief, anger, and overwhelming sorrow, and it has forever changed our family. As a mother, you are supposed to protect your children, and every day and night I have to face the fact that I failed. The most difficult thing to deal with is not knowing exactly what happened to my beloved Alice that night. As horrifying as it would be to learn the truth, it would be preferable to the constant struggle in my mind to figure out the sequence of events leading up to Alice's murder. There are no words to describe what an amazing and unique personality she had, or how much love, joy, passion, and compassion she brought into so many people's lives. Her passing is a tragedy beyond words. Alice's mother told investigators that shortly after midnight, her daughter texted that she was spending the night at a friend's house. The police issued an AB for Attila ban, but he simply vanished. They attempted to track his phone, but it was detected by cell towers in the same area as the hotel. This was extremely strange. As soon as it became clear, Attila had been closer than anyone had imagined all along. The investigation team spent 2 days at the scene before leaving the house. A few hours later, the forensic team decided to return to the house and conduct additional tests. They noticed that the door they had left open had been locked from the inside. When they entered the room, they noticed Attila Ban lying on the bed. He was drunk and attempted to injure himself with scissors and a knife. He had wounds on his neck and wrists. When they asked him questions, he acted strangely and attempted to demonstrate something with gestures. He was transported to the hospital, where doctors ensured his life was not in danger. The police were perplexed when they discovered where Attila Ban had spent the previous 2 days. He had cut a slit in the base of the sofa bed where Tibor's body was discovered, grabbed a phone and several bottles of water, and climbed inside. While the cops were on the scene, he remained inside, listening and watching through the holes he had made. The primary suspect, Attila Ban, was arrested right inside the hospital. The trial started on July 9, 2012. During the trial, some details about the brutal crime were revealed. The party spiraled out of control after Alice, Tibor, and Attila were left alone in the apartment. Prosecutors accepted there was sexual activity between all three, as DNA from both men was discovered on Miss Adams' breasts, until a Ban stated that he remembered the three of them being in bed and that there was a connection between them, but he had no recollection of what happened after that. He insisted that he only realized he had committed a terrible act after waking up in the morning and seeing Alice and her lifeless bodies. When he realized that his actions had killed 2 people, he made the decision to commit suicide. However, he stated that he was afraid to do it alone, so he removed his keyboard's clothing and climbed into the bathtub alongside him. Unable to hurt himself, he moved Tibor to the bed, knowing they would be sought after. He opened the divan bed's base and hid inside. While he was hiding there, he was even able to update his Facebook page. He sobbed loudly in the dark as prosecutor Richard Whittom explained the facts of the case to jurors. According to Mr. Whittom, 2 young people were killed violently and unjustly by this defendant. Although other cases have been discussed, it is difficult to find words to describe what happened in this case, other than to say that it was tragic that young people met their deaths in this manner. According to Mr. Whittom, Tibor Vass had relationships with hotel employees, and there is no evidence that he ever had a sexual relationship with an Attila Ban. However, Attila Ban appeared to have feelings for Tibor Vass and acted slightly possessively towards him. The court heard that Ban was jealous of you, and that just days before the crime, he threw a temper tantrum at his victim during a team building session when he took a picture in which Ban was not present. The situation reached a climax when the band learned that Tibor Vass had been accepted to a university course in Hungary and would be leaving Britain at the end of the month. The final straw may have been that an Attila Ban couldn't bear the sight of Tibor and Alice kissing, and in a fit of jealousy, killed both of them. In addition, prosecutor Richard Whittam stated in court that Attila Ban was found naked on the single bed. He had wounds on his wrist, forearm, and neck. It was clear that he had been hiding in the divan base of the double bed. He must have been present during the pathologist's visit, the removal of the bodies, and the crime scene examiner's examination of the scene. He had the foresight to effectively conceal himself and remain undetected throughout their stay on the premises. Following the case, Detective Inspector John Finch stated outside court that the police had not been negligent in not looking under the bed. He stated, "I've reviewed this with senior management several times. It was an unusual and bizarre thing for a person to do. It defies belief." He claimed that lifting up beds to look for people who were not present would result in the loss of critical forensic evidence. Tibor Vass and his mother, Rosalia, paid tribute to their son. Her statement included the following words: Tibor was a young boy who enjoyed music and the arts, repairing gadgets and practicing freestyle tricks on his BMX bicycle, Daisy. At home, he was always creative and enjoyed experimenting with computers, such as building stereo speakers out of cardboard and old cables. He had a passion for photography and spent his first paycheck on a professional camera. Tibor was consistently friendly, helpful, supportive, approachable, outgoing, and trustworthy. He had many friends in Hungary and the United Kingdom. On August 11th, I learned that two innocent 20-year-olds, my son Tibor and his friend Alice, were murdered. I learned that his friend had taken their lives. It was impossible and devastating to believe that such an event could occur. Previous to that, it gave me comfort to know Tibor had made a good friend in London who was mature, friendly, and intelligent. His friend promised me personally that he would look after my son and not let anything happen to him. I trusted him and saw him as one of my own. That's another reason why the news of my son's murder was so heartbreaking. Throughout the police investigation and trial, I had to relive the horrors of that night, which only added to my sadness. There are no words to describe the agony and loss that our family will experience for the rest of our lives. Until he pleaded guilty, Attila Ban claimed he couldn't remember the events of that horrific night. On July 18, 2012, on August 17, after only 5 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted 32-year-old Attila Ban. He was sentenced to 2 lifetime sentences. He will have to serve 26 years in prison before he can apply for parole. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. I'll see you in the morning, Mom. Misty Morse never spoke to her mother again after making that unfulfilled promise. What would motivate someone to take such action? How will Misty Morse never spoke to her mother again? Now is the time to start looking for answers. On April 10, 1978, Misty April Morse was born in Springfield, Ohio. When her family finally relocated to Indian Harbor Beach, Florida, it was a significant turning point in her life and gave her the opportunity to develop and discover new interests. Misty had an exciting and adventurous childhood in the Sunshine State, but when her parents divorced in 1996, her life took a dramatic turn. Misty and her mother, Linda, moved to a new house in Brevard County following the divorce. She stayed close to her father in spite of the change. Misty found work at a number of local bars and clubs during her late teens and early 20s, working a variety of jobs to make ends meet. After some time, she made the decision to continue her education and enrolled in a nearby college. Misty was characterized by friends as an adventurous, carefree young lady who never took life too seriously. When Misty got home from work early on July 22, 2000, she started preparing for a night out with a friend. Linda, her mother, was also up, getting ready for her 3 a.m. shift. Misty got a few brief phone calls while she was chatting with her mother. Misty promised to see her in the morning, as she said goodbye after the call. She had no idea that this would be her final farewell. Misty wasn't home the following morning when her mother got home. At first, she didn't give it much thought, assuming Misty must have spent the night at a friend's house. Misty had not returned or gotten in touch after another day. Her mother started calling Misty a lot out of concern. Misty rarely checked in, especially if she was going to be gone for a day or two. Fearing that no one had seen or spoken to her, her mother contacted Misty's friends and then her father. The more days went by, the more she worried. A retired judge went for a peaceful walk on July 24, 2000, to see how his boat, which was moored in the lagoon behind his house, was doing. He had no idea that a somber discovery would soon upend this serene moment. He was walking along the wooden dock when he noticed an odd object floating in the water below. His eyes widened in surprise as he leaned in to get a better look. When he followed the strong odor to the edge of his property, he initially believed he had discovered a dead manatee that had washed up in his backyard. Then, to his surprise, he soon discovered that it was a young woman's body. The man, appalled, hurried back to his home, picked up his phone, and dialed 911 telephone. Upon their prompt arrival, Brevard County Sheriff's Office officers immediately began their investigation. They observed that the body was in a highly decomposed state, indicating that the woman had been dead for a number of days. Her death was clearly not a coincidence. A marine rope was used to tie her hands and feet, with elaborate knots holding her wrists to her ankles, and white duct tape was used to firmly bind her mouth, eyes, and neck. Rolls of spline, a rubbery black substance, held the Publix plastic grocery bags strapped around her body. To sink the body, investigators thought these bags might have been weighted with sand or rocks. Due to the body's decomposition, detectives were unable to find any clues along the shoreline, including a wallet, phone, or purse that could be used to identify her. Medical examiners suspected asphyxiation but were unable to determine the cause of death. After that, investigators looked for any recent missing persons reports that might be related to the unnamed woman, but they were unable to find anything. The police had not yet been notified of Misty's disappearance. Finally, they attempted fingerprinting. She was eventually identified through the database, after forensic specialists used a technique known as degloving to lift fingerprints despite the skin's deterioration. Officers called Misty's mother, Linda, to break the terrible news after verifying the identity of the body. The harsh reality of her daughter's fate completely broke Linda's heart. Her voice trembled and broke into screams of anguish as she called a family friend, her grief echoing in every word. Investigators later showed up at Linda's house to conduct an interview. She tried her best to relive those last moments, now permanently altered by loss, as she described the events of the last night she saw Misty, her voice laden with grief. Although Misty had not disclosed her intended date for the evening, Linda saw her daughter's casual attire and deduced that Misty was probably meeting someone with whom she was totally at ease and with whom she didn't feel the need to impress. Linda remembered that early on July 20, Misty got 2 calls. Investigators quickly subpoenaed Misty's phone records just before she left, but in 2000, it could take weeks to get such information back. They continued interviewing Misty's closest friends and co-workers in the interim. Brought up the possibility that Misty was pregnant, which investigators couldn't ignore as a possible lead. Was her pregnancy a contributing factor? Linda also provided some names to the authorities, including Teddy Underwood, Misty's boyfriend. Investigators questioned whether Teddy might have reacted negatively to the news of Misty's potential pregnancy, given that they had only been dating for 2 months at the time. When Teddy was brought in for interrogation, it soon became clear that he didn't think their relationship was serious. Additionally, he stated that he was unsure if Misty was pregnant. He gave an alibi for the early hours of July 20 by claiming to be at work, which investigators subsequently verified, exonerating him from suspicion. The intricate knots that bound Misty's body caught the attention of detectives as they combed through the crime scene's evidence. This degree of specificity implied that the murderer may have had knot-tying experience, which made them think about careers as a Coast Guard member, a boat captain, or a person with Navy training. They hoped that this clue would bring them one step closer to the truth. Misty's hands and legs were tied with a rope that featured a cow-hitched knot, which isn't something that most people are familiar with. Investigators focused on the numerous layers of tape that were wrapped around the victim's hands, limbs, and face. She had a hat on. Her freedom of movement was limited. The head had tape wrapped around it. She was under control. She was tied up and bound. Despite having the appearance of duct tape, this tape was unique because it was white instead of the usual metallic gray. Because white duct tape was so uncommon at the time, the authorities were more interested. Their hopes were dashed when no trace evidence, such as DNA or fingerprints, turned up on the tape's adhesive. Another dead end, it seemed. They then discovered a few short black hairs adhered to the tape, almost by accident, Given that the victim's hair was a distinctive shade of brown with a hint of red, the detectives knew these couldn't be hers. This finding raised the possibility that the hairs belonged to the murderer. All of the evidence was sent for testing after the crime scene was carefully examined. Unfortunately, this lead could not be fully pursued in 2000 due to the lack of precise DNA analysis technology. As they met with the medical examiner the following day to discuss the autopsy results, their frustration increased. The body had been submerged for less than 72 hours, according to the examiner's report. However, it was impossible to determine the precise cause of death due to exposure to the weather. There were no visible signs of trauma, no broken bones, and no gunshot wounds. Detectives were left with two terrifying options. Either the victim had been thrown into the water while still alive, or the tape covering her mouth and nose had strangled or suffocated her. In an effort to reduce the number of suspects on their list, investigators continued to interview people. Linda recommended that they investigate Bobby Cooper, whom Misty had recently met at a house party. Given that Bobby had visited their house only a few days prior to Misty's passing, Linda was especially wary of him. Bobby, though, was promptly disqualified as a suspect. He didn't match the murderer's description. He didn't own a boat, he hadn't been in the military, and he had no criminal history. Bobby's interview, however, proved to be a pivotal moment in the investigation. Brent Huck, Misty's ex-boyfriend, gave the detectives a name that appeared to fit the profile they were looking for, even though he wasn't the murderer. Investigators tracked down Brent Huck, who resided on South Merritt Island, just south of the location where Misty's body was found. After receiving a tip from Bobby Cooper, Brent accepted their invitation to participate in an interview. Brent disclosed in the interview that he was a charter boat captain and that he was from a wealthy family. He also acknowledged having been a member of the Navy SEALs. Brent acknowledged that he had kept up his relationship with Misty after their breakup, even though he was now in a new one. Brent admitted that he was the likely father of Misty and that he had spoken to her the night before she vanished in the early hours of July 20, 2000. He also acknowledged that he knew she was pregnant. Brent was a prime suspect because of his background as a former Navy SEAL and charter boat captain, his relationship with Misty, and his contemptuous demeanor during the interview. After that, Brent gave the authorities permission to search his house. When investigators arrived, they saw a Rottweiler with short black hair that matched the duct tape that was used to bind Misty. According to Brent, Misty gave him the dog as a gift. A roll of rubber spline, which is usually used to weatherproof windows, was found during their search, an odd item for a home. Red flags were raised by this and other items discovered in Brent's bedroom and kitchen that matched evidence from the crime scene, such as white duct tape and Publix bags. Outside, Brent gave officers permission to search a boat he claimed was his, which was anchored in the nearby waterway. They discovered matted hair next to a fishing rod holder and 2 hair strands on the floor. The boat's ropes were identical to the kind that were used to restrain Misty. When investigators questioned Brent after gathering the evidence, he said something startling. There couldn't be an explanation for a woman tied up and thrown in the river. He was further implicated by this statement, which disclosed knowledge of information that had not yet been made public. The state attorney was reluctant to file charges because, in his opinion, the circumstantial evidence was not strong enough. He maintained that commonplace supplies like rubber spline, rope, and duct tape could be found anywhere, and that Misty's hair on the boat might just indicate that she had paid Brent a visit. Both the investigators and Misty's family were extremely frustrated by this setback. Authorities persisted in their investigation in the hopes of a break, unfazed. Pet DNA became admissible in court in 2002 after a landmark decision in a California case. The black dog hair discovered on the duct tape was compared to Brent's dog's DNA by investigators, and the results verified that they were a match. The state attorney's office decided to move forward with the prosecution after receiving this crucial piece of evidence along with the mounting circumstantial evidence. Brent Huck was taken into custody and accused of killing Misty Morse on October 23, 2002. Prosecutors claimed during the trial that Brent killed Misty because he was afraid her pregnancy would jeopardize his new relationship. They described in graphic detail how he used the pretense of reconciliation to entice Misty to her demise. The crucial DNA match from the dog hair discovered at the crime scene was among the strong circumstantial evidence gathered by detectives and presented by the prosecution. It was time to decide Brent's fate after all the arguments and supporting documentation had been presented. Brent Huck was found guilty of first-degree felony murder and felony kidnapping in May 2003. He received 2 consecutive life sentences without the chance of release. He is presently incarcerated at the Apalachicola Correctional Institution in Florida. This decision ensured that Misty's terrible death was not unanswered and gave her family a sense of justice and closure. This case emphasizes how crucial it is to persevere in pursuing justice despite obstacles. It also reminds us how important it is for communities and committed investigators to hold people responsible for their actions. Even though Misty's life was tragically cut short, her story would live on thanks to the pursuit of justice. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Lam Kor Wan, Hong Kong's first serial killer, was introduced in 1982. He worked as a taxi driver, but at night he was known as the Rainy Night Butcher and the Jars Killer. Over the course of 7 months, he killed 4 young women, concealing their bodies beneath his family's couch and preserving their body parts in jars. Every murder was more graphic than the one before it. They all appeared in unsettling movies, from suffocation to the amputation of body parts. What perverse ideas motivated this man, and who was he? How did these women end up as his gullible victims? Let's discover the terrifying reality that was born on May 22, 1955, in the center of Hong Kong. Lam Kor Wan had a challenging childhood. With 10 children, a legal wife, and 2 mistresses, his father, Lam Weil Lok, led a difficult life. This set the stage for Lam's turbulent early years. Lam was subjected to cruel treatment during his early years while residing in Malaysia with his biological mother. His father violently abused both of them at home. Lam's situation was made worse by the fact that his parents divorced when he was a child. Due to a horrific event in which his father slammed his head against a wall, leaving 2-year-old Lam unconscious with periorbital bruises and a fractured skull, his father had a fierce temper. Following a period in Brunei from 1957 to 1962, during which Lam shared a dormitory with his father's half-siblings and mistresses. Despite his academic success in primary school, Lam returned to Hong Kong in 1968 to attend Ricci Middle School in Sham Shui Po for junior high school. Having to balance 2 different school schedules because of his father's work had affected Lam's performance, particularly in mathematics. By 1970, Lam's academic standing had declined due to the demands of managing his father's motorcycle shop after school. His relationship with his father deteriorated even more, and this was marked by harsh treatment. Lam also started running away from home a lot as a result of this. Up until middle school, it had become a recurring pattern in his life. Lam had begun working in his father's motorcycle shop years after he had graduated from high school. He later went on to learn how to service air conditioners from a relative. The entire ordeal, which was replete with family issues during difficult times, had prepared Lam Kor Wan to become the enigmatic individual he would become. After a fight with his father outside a public restroom on Hakuin Street in early 1973, he was expelled from his house and sent home. After forcing a woman into the bathroom with a knife, he touched her lower body in an inappropriate manner. He was arrested as a result of this incident. A doctor examined Lam and determined that he had mental health problems, making him unfit for trial or incarceration. He was therefore ordered to receive treatment at King Shan Mental Hospital. He chose to change his name to Lam Jiao Koang by the time he was 19, after being treated for 102 days and being released from the hospital. Along with his collection of locked-away pornography kept in a metal ammunition box, his family noticed his odd fascination with the female body. Even though his family made an attempt to assist him, nothing seemed to change. His behavior changed to something more unsettling when these measures did not satisfy him. The women chased him down the street after he bought a Polaroid camera and started taking illegal photos of them from beneath the doors of restroom cubicles. At their home in Kwantong, he had later been caught snooping on his sister as she undressed outside the restroom. After that, the family decided to move further away, into Kwawan at their new residence. There was an agreement in place for him and his younger brother to share a room and sleep in different parts of a bunk bed. They were to keep their possessions separate and free from outside interference. He officially began working as a taxi driver in 1978, after obtaining a license and assuming the name Lam Kor Wan. His family only saw him every 14 to 15 days after he was moved to the night schedule, around 1980. He then developed an intense interest in photography in 1981, which led him to study the art form. But since he didn't have a darkroom at home to print color pictures, he looked for a photo studio. He enrolled in a photography course offered by the Chinese YMCA of Hong Kong at the Waterloo Road Association in order to avoid suspicion. His classmate was employed at a sim shots. Lam made up a story about needing help with autopsy photos because he was a part-time photographer and worked in a mortuary. Surprisingly, his account was approved, and the classmate edited Lam's images to prevent alarming other students. His mother observed a significant shift in his behavior after he had been a night taxi driver for a year. He began to disregard personal hygiene, declining to take a shower or change his clothes. On the gloomy night of February 3, 1982, at the age of 27, his mother even saw him wander home like a sleepwalker in the dead of night, but his demeanor became forlorn. During his time as a taxi driver in the Simsha district, Lam changed from being a simple peeping Tom to something more sinister. He was looking for clients one day who were coming home from a night out. This is where things started to go south. When Chan Feng Lan, a clearly drunk woman, emerged from a restaurant at around 4 in the morning, she was in such need of a ride that many taxi drivers refused to give it to her. Lam, apparently unfazed by this, accepted her into his taxi and consented to drive her home. The inebriated woman asked to stop halfway through the trip, and when Lam braked close to a gas station, she opened the door to throw up. Uncertain of where she was, she asked Lam to return in the opposite direction after this disturbing incident. Later, Lammy admitted that he had considered killing her, but something inside of him snapped and he decided he had had enough after being initially disgusted by her vomiting. He went into a garage in the Simshasui neighborhood, circled to the passenger door, and strangled the young lady with an electric cable. He drove to his house at 5 in the morning when he usually finished work and parked in front of the building as usual. The night watchman slept on a cot in the entry hall and did not wake up, so he concealed the body in a big bag and carried it across the pavement into his apartment building while the street was empty. After Lam died, he went into the apartment as quietly as he could and spent several hours hiding the body beneath the sofa. Lam waited for his family to depart after breakfast while feigning to be asleep in his bed. He woke up and began preparing his room after his brother and parents had left the apartment. Lam purchased a power saw from the street using 500 yuan that he had stolen from the victim's wallet. To ensure that even the baseboards were adequately protected, he covered the floor with plastic. He began to dismember the innocent woman's body after placing it on the plastic. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to avoid leaving any blood traces, and some of it splashed onto the walls. He continued to dismember the victim's body for hours, taking pictures and videos of the entire procedure, before naming the videotape a serious secret. After chopping her body into 7 parts, he wrapped paper around her head, limbs, and torso before sealing it in a plastic bag. The fact that he preserved the private parts in a Tupperware container with rice wine was the most unsettling aspect. In order to remove any traces of the horror that had transpired, he meticulously cleaned the crime scene, scrubbing the walls and floor and rolling up the plastic sheet. He drove to the new areas, making multiple trips to carry the body parts to his taxi while avoiding attention from onlookers who were confident he had removed any traces of the unsettling act. He stopped when he discovered an empty area on the banks of the Xingmun River, close to Sha Tin. He was determined to find a remote location to dispose of the body. He removed the packages from his trunk one by one and tossed them into the river, making sure no one was looking. The bundles were carried to the sea by the murky waters. The limbs floated from Lucky Plaza to the Bel Air Gardens area after being washed down by the intense rain. Lam had heard the terrifying news on the radio more than a week after the horrible deed. A limb had been found on the shores of the Xingmun River. More body parts were unearthed in the following days, leaving the police to piece together the tragic puzzle. To determine the approximate time the body was dumped into the river, investigators looked at tidal patterns. Interestingly, one arm had a unique tattoo of a heart with a knife through it, which was uncommon for women at the time. They arrived at this conclusion. Recognizing the victim, it was Chan Fenglan, age 21. The police encountered regrettable difficulties even after issuing a public call for witnesses. Neither the taxi driver nor Chan Fenglan's companions had seen the license plate. Lam didn't learn of the body part's discovery for over a week. The police had determined that the body belonged to Chan Fenglan, a Simsha nightclub hostess and mother of two. Chan's night out with her sister and friends, her taxi ride home, and the terrible fate she met at the hands of Lam Kor 1 were all revealed in the grim details. Sui. The next murder was carefully planned, but the murder had been opportunistic. He was determined to be more prepared because he was a perfectionist. His goal was surgical accuracy. He therefore chose to use professional tools rather than a power saw. In the end, he bought specialized surgical instruments and multiple bottles of formaldehyde after studying knives, blades, and scissors in great detail. Formaldehyde was a colorless, pungent chemical that was used for disinfection and preservation. Lam had claimed another victim on May 29, 1982, 3 days after acquiring his equipment. He was able to capture his second target, a bar employee. This time, he picked Chan Wan Kit calmly and used an electric cable to strangle her before bringing her home. He waited in bed as usual for his family to get off work before beginning the grisly task of dismembering the body. Lam had carefully prepared the room in accordance with his plan after thinking about what to do for days. After setting a sizable tray underneath the body to keep blood off the floor, he took out his video camera. Investigators later reviewed the video and found that he had carefully dissected the body while placing the tray beneath the family's parakeet cage. When Lam had finished chopping it into pieces, he displayed remarkable skill. As Lam considered a secure location for the body's disposal, he once more took photos of the various body parts. After numerous nighttime excursions, he eventually discovered the ideal location. He placed the body parts in a large plastic bag and put it in the trunk of his taxi this time. He drove through the tunnel to the selected location, Hong Kong Island, early in the morning. A 20-minute drive east of the city center was Tai Hang Road, a residential neighborhood with a lot of trees. Following his parking in a secret area of the road, the heavy bag became difficult for him to carry out of the trunk. As he watched it roll down the slope into a muddy ravine, he carried it a short distance up to the railing and threw the body over it. Lam had been thinking about what had happened that night all the time in the days that followed, not because he was sorry or regretful, but because he wanted to become a better person. On June 17, 1982, 2 weeks later, he had struck once more. Liang Saowan, a 29-year-old nightclub cleaner, had left work at 4 a.m. and was in Lam's taxi shortly after she met her terrible end. Lam took her lifeless body back to his house and engaged in a terrifying string of acts. He recorded his horrifying deeds, titling the recording, Operation Rainy Night. Lam used the selfie feature on his camcorder, which was resting on the bunk bed, to record the dismemberment procedure, displaying an unnerving amount of detail in contrast to his earlier action. On this occasion, he even cut open the abdomen, removed the intestine, and even tried to taste human flesh before giving up because it made him sick. Then, in yet another horrific episode of this gruesome rampage, he abandoned the severed limbs in a burlap bag on Tai Hang Road. Lam had grown bolder with every crime. Knowing the bars in the Simsha Sui neighborhood, he had spent his time meticulously planning his next crime. He was also aware of the locations where women frequently waited by themselves for his cab. He had wanted the next victim to be a woman from a higher social class, but his first 3 victims had been what he had dubbed bad girls. He purposefully chose a young woman who seemed innocent, and this time it was Liang Wai Sum, 17. On July 2, 1982, Lam had discovered her outside the Simha Sui Hotel. Before the final exams, she had gone to a party at her high school, but she had made the decision to leave after dinner. Her high school friends had gotten her a cab to make sure she would get home safely. Lamb parked his car and guided her to a remote road. When he took hold of her wrist and handcuffed her to the front seat, the teen was frightened. Surprisingly, he wanted company, which was another reason he wanted to keep her in his taxi, even though it was only 9:30 p.m. and too early for him to go home. Desperate for a friend, he kept Ling confined for hours, asking her about her family, religion, and life in general. He wanted to talk to her without any friends. Lamb was generally enjoying her company, but that didn't stop him from carrying out his gruesome scheme. Lamb began strangling the teenager with the electric cable after she fell asleep at around 4 in the morning. He then brought the dead girl's body home and, as usual, waited for his family to vacate the apartment. He hung his video camera from a high shelf and started recording when no one else was home. This was the video that the police would eventually play in court. The video wasn't just unsettling. Lamb was acting necrophilically, that is, performing inappropriate acts with the dead body in the video. It should be mentioned that Lamb had burned the young victim's skin after falling on her thighs while he was earlier assembling the lighting apparatus to record his activities. In order to later refer to it as the 4/3 operation, he also recorded it on video and took pictures of her. Then, just like he had done with the earlier victims, he dismembered the body, which would later come back to haunt him. On August 10, 1982, he later left the body on Tai Hang Road. Lamb tried to make his fourth victim's mutilated photo larger. As it happened, Lamb's friend had to move Lamb's negatives to the Mongkok branch for magnification because the enlarger at his friend's Photoshop was broken. Suspicious as he was, the branch's photo editors discovered disturbing details in the developed photos during the manual enlargement process, suggesting a possible connection to the dismemberment of a human body. A picture of a severed breast and a burn mark on the victim's thigh were among the features that prompted the shop supervisor to call the police. The Kowloon Regional Homicide Squad was given the case by the police after they received the report. Detectives under the direction of Sergeant Lee Kwon obtained statements from the clerks at the Sima, Sui, and Mongkok branches while safeguarding the negatives and photograph. After a thorough examination and analysis of the flesh and blood color, the forensic officer from the Scientific Forensics Department concluded that the photographed corpse had been dead for less than 3 hours. The dismemberment technique ruled out the possibility that the perpetrator was teaching pictures because it implied that they lacked medical anatomical knowledge. The typical green sheet used in autopsies was conspicuously missing. Additionally, forensic specialists verified that the images were taken directly from a real body rather than from printed materials. In one picture, a tiny drop of water also reflected half the face of a girl who looked like Leong Wai Sum, who had disappeared on July 2. The police decided to make an arrest after concluding that Ling had been murdered, based on the results of the Scientific Forensics Division and medical examiner. Sergeant Lee had led the team in an ambush at the Photoshop early on August 17. He asked the clerk to mix a Lamb set of 13 photos with a few other pictures and encouraged him to talk to Lamb about the pictures, where they were taken, and why they were being enlarged. The goal was to document the discussion and collect supporting documentation. Lamb arrived by taxi to pick up the pictures at about 6 o'clock in the evening. Following his friend's request, he carefully examined each picture and clarified that the enlarged images would be used for courtroom presentations, especially so jurors could see the contents more clearly. Lamb said that he worked in mortuaries on a regular basis. Sergeant Lee revealed his identity after verifying the images and making the payment, and he immediately took Lamb into custody. Lamb first made up a story, claiming that the pictures were taken by a four-eyed man he had met in Kwan who worked for the Oriental Daily. Investigations, however, showed that there was no such individual. In order to gather tangible evidence, the authorities promptly requested a warrant so they could search Lamb's home within the allotted 48 hours. Otherwise, they would have needed to let him go. During the search, they found personal belongings, preservatives, anatomy books, surgical instruments, Lamb's cupboards, and severed body parts, including the deceased women's breasts and vaginas. His taxi was also seized and searched by the police, who left a note on the windshield stating that it was not to be towed and that it had been involved in a crime. Subsequent investigation of the car turned up evidence like wire and handcuffs in the glove box, as well as 2 holes in the back of the front seat that were probably made by one of the women who died wearing high heels during a struggle. Investigators allegedly recovered a large collection that included 1,900 carefully coded photos, 1,500 color slides, and 696 negatives that documented coronavirus victims at different points in his crimes. His thorough documentation greatly facilitated the police inquiry. All of his victims' body parts were eventually found by authorities, allowing for their identification and eventual return to their families. To assist with the investigation, Lam Korwan was taken to the police station with his father and younger brother. Authorities suspected that the taxi driver wasn't acting alone because of the small living area and the amount of evidence found in Lam and his brother's bedroom. After 3 days of intense interrogation and detention, Linwas was freed. The younger Lam insisted that he had little contact with his brother because of their divergent schedules and was neither involved in nor aware of the incidents to expedite their release. Korwan was pressed by their father and younger brother to make it clear that they had nothing to do with trying to get her son to confess. Lam's mother went to the police station as well. Korwan assisted law enforcement in identifying the victims' body parts. The police, however, continued to suspect the younger Lam of involvement despite their cooperation. As a result, both brothers were brought before the Sanpo Kong magistrates' courts on 4 counts of murder. In order to support the younger brother's persistent denial of involvement, they were later moved to the Sulam Psychiatric Center for evaluation. After the 6th hearing, he was ultimately freed because there was not enough evidence. The case was sent to the Supreme Court for trial after a medical evaluation determined that Korwan was of sound mind, had a remarkably high IQ, reportedly over 130, and was deemed fit to stand trial with established prima facie evidence. On March 3, 1983, the trial began, and a large crowd gathered outside the court to watch Lam's behavior. Because it was thought that the more than 1,000 pieces of evidence that would be presented in the case were too graphic for women, a number of men were chosen to serve on the jury. Authorities claimed that the specifics of the case were too upsetting for women, so 7 men were chosen specifically to guarantee a fair trial and avoid shock. The only people who could watch Lam's videotapes were the jurors, judges, and attorneys. Furthermore, during the trial, the victims' organs were not allowed in the courtroom. Police officers, Photoshop employees, forensic and scientific specialists, and even Lam's relatives were called as witnesses by the prosecution. Acknowledging the strength of the evidence against him, Lam negotiated a reduced sentence in exchange for admitting to manslaughter. But this appeal was turned down. The jury was instructed by the judge to choose between charges of murder and manslaughter, rather than to discuss Lam's guilt, with testimony from 5 psychiatrists. The trial descended into arguments about Lam's mental health. 3 of them suggested an obsession with women, while 2 questioned his self-control. On April 8 the same year, after 18 days, the judge gave the jury instructions to render a verdict based on whether or not they thought Lam had control over his actions during the crimes. The jury unanimously concluded that Lam was sane, motivated by aberrant desires, and guilty of murder. After more than 3 hours of deliberation, Lam was originally given a hanging death sentence, but thanks to the governor's pardon, his sentence was reduced to life in prison when Hong Kong abolished the death penalty in 1984. Following his conviction, Lam was taken to Stanley Prison and then Shekpik Prison, where he was called a lamb by the other inmates. He kept a low profile, avoiding conversations about his past and valuing his privacy. Rob. He reportedly had a modest salary, was reticent and rarely interacted with people. He read religious, medical, and newspaper articles and took part in Catholic and Christian classes while incarcerated. While he did not receive family visits, he did occasionally receive visits from church volunteers. He amassed a reputation among the prisoners for his understanding of purple star astrology, a type of Chinese fortune-telling, and his cell was stocked with books and newspapers. When Lam applied for parole in 2018 at the age of 62, after serving more than 34 years, even prison officials sought his counsel, raising public outrage. The parole board decided against changes or parole at that time due to concerns about the possibility of repeat offenses, even though they review parole every 5 years. According to reports, during the 1983 trial, Lam was also observed by some inmates dissecting cockroaches in the prison and making elaborate displays out of them while they were kept in a matchbox. In her testimony, Lam's mother described the physical abuse her oldest son had suffered as a child. The father of coronavirus had even caused severe head trauma when the boy was only 2 years old, leaving him with 2 black eyes. She had also been the victim of domestic violence. Experts have connected severe head injuries sustained as a child to psychological problems like necrophilia later in life. Lam reportedly told a psychiatrist that he thought God had given him the order to carry out the murders. Lam's actions remained mysterious throughout the investigation. Investigators were baffled by his decision to develop films at a Kodak store, even though he had the required equipment. Some conjectured that he may have secretly wished for arrest because he had almost been arrested before the gruesome autopsy results, and the manner in which the bodies were dismembered suggested that a professional killer was at work. However, despite these disturbing facts, Lam's family had difficulties because of the case's publicity. They tried to sell their apartment but were unsuccessful because of its fame, so they were forced to stay after the case ended. The police, concerned about possible media exploitation, destroyed all of Lam's tapes and photographs. Some of the victims' organs, however, had a different destiny there and were kept for educational purposes at the Wan Chai Forensic Medicine headquarters. As our journey through Lamkor, Wan's haunting saga, comes to an end, it is important to remember these 4 innocent women whose lives were tragically taken. Lam's father sought atonement for his son's sins on November 16, 1986, by dedicating a memorial tablet at Yuan Shin College for the lives lost to his son's evil. The story of Lam Kor Wan serves as a chilling reminder of the intricacies of the human psyche and the terrible outcomes they can produce. Such tales act as a forceful plea for greater comprehension, awareness, and attention to mental health. As the first serial killer in Hong Kong's history, Lam Kor Wan, now 68, is serving a life sentence in the maximum security Shek Pik prison on Lantau Island for the gruesome killings that rocked Hong Kong in the early 1980 CE. His reign of terror came to an end on August 17, 1982, the fateful day of his arrest, when he was just 27 years old. His horrifying post-crime rituals, which included hiding victims under the family couch and preserving body parts in jars, earned him the terrifying nicknames the Rainy Night Butcher and the Jars Murderer. Such unsettling behaviors reveal a terrifying picture of a disturbed mind. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Today we'll examine what happened in the U.S. state of California in 2011. Daylene Carlson, a 23-year-old college student, relocated from Idaho to Stockton, California. She was looking forward to beginning a new chapter in her life while residing at her Aunt Maggie's house. But she never came home after going out to meet some friends on August 6, 2011. Beginning at 3:30 a.m. on August 7, her aunt called her multiple times but got no response. Worried, she informed the police about Della Neelane's disappearance. To find the truth, detectives started an investigation and used CCTV footage. Della Neelane was preparing to go out on Saturday night. Her cousin Cecily had plenty of time to acquaint her with the local nightlife, as college was still 3 months away. Cecily had a fever, so they stayed home instead of going to the Finnegan's pub to meet up with some more friends. Daylene had to return home by 1 in the morning after going to the bar by herself, but Maggie and Aggie started to worry when 1 in the morning rolled around and Daylene was still not home. Maggie repeatedly called Colleen Yaleen but got no answer. Maggie stayed up all night calling Colleen Yaleen's number every now and then, but, as before, her niece didn't answer. Maggie searched for a plausible reason why Colleen Yaleen hadn't come home. Della Neelanen hadn't come home by morning, so she speculated that her niece might have spent the night at a friend's house. Maggie called the police when she realized she could not wait any longer. Despite receiving a report, the police believed Della Neelanen had stayed at a friend's house following the party and would soon return. The investigators made the decision to hold off a bit longer. In the meantime, Della Neelanen's family started their own inquiry. On social media, they announced Della Neelanen's disappearance, and urged anyone with information to get in touch with the police or her family. The day after Darlene Leal's disappearance, August 8, 2011, the police opened an official investigation because her family suspected something terrible might have happened because it was out of character for her to simply vanish without warning anyone. Her Aunt Maggie's home was the first location the detectives visited. They wanted to talk to Darlene's relatives, see her in her room, and make sure none of them had anything to do with her disappearance. Danielle was a girl, like any other American. Her disappearance was extremely unusual, and she was young, attractive, and had big plans for the future. Detectives searched Darlene's room, but they found no evidence that she had fled her house. Her room contained all of her possessions, as well as a few documents. Cecily took a picture of Dowland Darlene wearing torn jeans and a brown and white striped top the night she vanished. Cecily informed Detective Darlene that they had frequently visited the Finn Pub's pub in the past, and that Darlene had planned to go there. The detectives then went to the bar to speak with the employees and perhaps obtain additional information. On the night Darlene vanished, the bar manager recalled seeing her in the street at around midnight. He described what had happened that evening, but he could not think of anything out of the ordinary. Thankfully, security cameras were present. Surveillance footage can greatly aid an investigation, even though it might not give a full picture. 2 operational security cameras in the bar recorded hours of Saturday night activity. The detectives made the decision to obtain a copy of the recordings and go over everything back at the police station, because it would have taken a long time to go through the footage. This, they hoped, would allow them to find out who Darlene had slept with, and more crucially, with whom she had left the bar. At first look, the tape appeared to be normal. On the street, young women and men congregated, smoking and chatting. It appeared to be a typical Saturday night in a pub, but they are drawn to one girl in particular. She's dressed in a striped top similar to the one from the day. Darlene is wearing a striped top in the final photo. She goes back to the bar at 1:40 and 0 in the morning. Another security camera is located inside, in the corridor close to the restrooms. Photo 41 is watched by detectives. After 61 minutes, she was observed consuming alcohol. She might have been a bit more exposed than normal. In a hallway full of young men, she is the only woman. Every person in this video could be a suspect, and even if they are not, they might be a witness. Darlene seems content and at ease as she watches the video. At 0:40 in the morning, detectives see a young man approaching her from behind and placing his arm around her waist, indicating that someone is about to approach too closely. A short while later, as she was going into the bathroom, a man with a beard and an outfit that was backwards passed her. Darlene Ram, who was not particularly disturbed by the young man's presence, also didn't seem very happy to see him. As soon as they saw this video, the detectives knew they needed to find this man. So they talked to her friends and neighbors. They discovered once more that Jason Gilley was the man who had Darlene around his waist. Jason was well known to Darlene Cecily's cousin Cecily and her friends, who frequently got together at his house for an enjoyable evening. Investigators found Jason Gilley's home and spoke with him. They questioned him about where he was when Darlene vanished that night. Jason clarified that he had planned to take Darlene home after spending the evening with her, but he had to leave early due to his child's needs. Jason claimed that he came home by himself. He claimed that because his young son was ill, he left the bar at around 1 in the morning and got home at 1:30. He brought up another possible suspect. Jason suggested to the detectives that they should speak with Evangelisti. According to him, Evangelisti was seeing Jacob Evangelisti, but they had a fight in front of Jason 4 days prior to her disappearance. Because jealousy frequently leads people to act rashly, the detectives were interested in this information. Thus, they made the decision to learn more about Jacob Evangelisti. The investigators discovered some recent images of Jacob while searching through Darlene's social media accounts. To find out if Jacob was present, they made the decision to watch the bar's security footage again. They changed the video at 1:06, when Darlene left the eatery and went up to the man who was leaning against the wall. Darlene's behavior appears to drastically change when he is around. She seems to be very upset about something, as evidenced by the vigorous hand movements. The investigators attempt to determine whether it might be her boyfriend Jacob, but the bright lights make it impossible to see his face. After a few seconds of their brief conversation, Darlene left, leaving the detectives to keep watching and trying to figure out who the mystery man was. They finally recognize him as Jacob Evangelisti when he turns to face the camera. During the interview, detectives brought Jacob Evangelisti in to be questioned. Jacob appeared to be quite upset. He was asked about his relationship with Darlene by the detectives, who specifically wanted to know when and how he had last seen her. Jacob claimed that he and Darlene had last seen each other at a bar. Jacob disclosed that Darlene had ended their relationship that evening at Negan's bar. "I had no intention of ending my relationship with Darlene," he said. To be honest, he was furious that she had ended their relationship. Darlene had left the bar without him, Jacob later said. He adamantly denied any involvement in her disappearance. After that, the investigators reviewed the CCTV footage to see if it supports his account. Jacob walks into the bar at 1:09 in the morning. They keep on observing. Darlene enters the picture after Darlene Newts. She seems to be bidding one of the patrons farewell. She then exits the frame at 1:15 a.m. The detectives kept going over the video until the bar had closed and all of the patrons had left. The lights go out at 2:38 a.m. When Daynether appears again, the parking lot is almost deserted. It appeared that Jacob was responsible for Darlene's disappearance at this stage of the investigation. Investigators have not yet found any evidence that her disappearance was the result of foul play, but it's possible that he just couldn't move on from the fact that she had left him. Darlene's family is searching on their own, according to Darlene. They created flyers and began distributing them throughout the city. They wanted as many people as possible to know about Darlene's disappearance. After she left the bar, she might have been spotted by someone. Detectives ask Evangelisti if anyone knows what happened to her at the stock station. Evangelisti wants more, but he maintains his denial of any knowledge. James, another person in Darlene's social circle, is the name he gives instead. Darlene claims to have a new boyfriend. Darlene's social circle also includes James. They had a relationship, even though James wasn't Darlene's boyfriend. James was also a close friend, which was another interesting fact. Jason Gillies' pal. They actually shared the same home. Darlene's ability to enter into such a relationship and then vanish almost instantly afterward was highly intriguing. This sparked intense suspicion about James and the idea that he might have had something to do with her disappearance. James was asked to talk about his relationship with Darlene at the police station. Although he acknowledges that he and Darlene were romantically involved, he says he has no knowledge of the night she went to the bar. James had information he wanted to share, but he claimed to have been out of town when the police began looking into his alibi. He informed investigators that Darlene texted him to let them know she was with a new man after she disappeared. James verified that Darlene was there by showing the detectives his phone, which was Darlene's. Detectives came up with a new theory after she wrote that she was leaving the bar to go to a friend's party, but the friend's identity was still unknown. It is likely that Darlene had to visit the grocery store or the liquor store in order to continue the party. A list of 24-hour liquor stores has been compiled by investigators. Elis was the name of the store that was closest to Finnegan's. When detectives arrived, they discovered that a Darlene was equipped with security cameras. The security cameras recorded Darlene if she was there. The detectives began watching the security camera footage outside. When Darlene saw her walking into the store with a young man, their suspicion was confirmed. However, who was he? Since the video only captured his back, a precise identification was not possible. Darlene and her enigmatic companion purchased what appeared to be a bottle of alcohol as the detectives started going over the footage from the other cameras. At 1:31 a.m., they waited for them to leave the store before switching back to the exterior camera. Detectives have a better picture after the couple leaves the store. The first face the detectives saw in the bar footage was the same as the one with the baseball cap and goatee on backwards. This gave them a new lead for their ongoing investigation when Jason Gilly noticed it. Jason initially claimed to investigators that he went home alone at 1:30 a.m. to tend to his ailing son after leaving Finnegan's bar. It was now evident to the police that he and Darlene had left the liquor store at 1:31 in the morning. Jason became the prime suspect right away because he had lied about leaving the bar by himself. Jason Gilly was taken into custody by the police 1 week after Darlene vanished. After an hour or so of waiting, the detectives started questioning him while keeping an eye on any behavioral changes. The detectives went over Jason's account of what transpired that evening without disclosing that they had a tape recording of Jason's shopping excursion at night. They asked him to recall the time he left the bar and arrived home. Jason lied once more, claiming that he got a text from his grandmother at 1 in the morning and went home to see how his son was doing. The detectives then told him that they had spoken to his grandmother, who denied any involvement in the night. Jason admitted to the detectives that night that he had gone home by himself to spend time with his son and that his grandmother had not gotten in touch with him. Jason repeated his claim that he left alone and came home, after telling another lie when asked who he left with. The detectives realized that Jason was putting himself in a situation he would never be able to get out of. They claimed to have surveillance footage that refuted all of his claims. Jason then acknowledged that he had left the bar with Dal for less, to buy her a bottle of Jägermeister and to eat for less. However, he claimed to have driven her back to the bar before leaving for home. He claimed it slipped his mind when detectives questioned him about why he had lied about a crucial detail, such as the fact that Dalny had left with Dalny. Daleen claims that he invited her to stay the night on his couch and she agreed. He acknowledged that he and Daleen had had intimate contact and that they shared a Jägermeister. After he explained it to Dalenate became upset, said it shouldn't have happened, and sobbed as he went home. Jason related a news story about how they got into a fight early on Sunday morning while he was driving Dalenate home. He picked up his grandmother on the corner close to his house and got into her car. She tried to get out of the car just before they arrived at Dalenate's house. Daleny Karengrein was upset and yelled to be allowed to get out of the car for the duration of the 30 to 45-minute drive. She said she couldn't believe Jason had done this and called him a piece of garbage. Jason claims that the last time he saw Daleny, she got out of the car and fled when he pulled over. The interview ended when Jason insisted on having a lawyer. Gilly was not charged by the police because they did not have enough evidence. Gilly had no choice but to let him go. Jason went to the police station on August 22, 2011, after being released on August 18, 2011, to report that his wallet had been stolen or lost. Upon seeing him, detectives investigating Daleen's disappearance were taken aback. Jason was approached by Detective Robert Fain, who asked him to accompany him on a retracement of the path he took on the day Daleen vanished. Jason consented and led the detective to the spot where Daleen is said to have jumped out of the car and run away. When the detective questioned Jason about why he didn't try to apprehend her, Jason said that he had to return home because the car behind him was honking, so he got back on the freeway. Then Jason explained that he had been looking for Leany Lean for 10 or 15 minutes, but he had to leave because his gas tank was nearly empty. To get gas, he drove to Stockton's Archie Road. The detective went to the gas station with no fresh leads. Luckily, security cameras were in place. There, at 10:46 a.m. on August 7, 2011. Jason pulled over at the gas station on Archie Road exit on Highway 99 in Stockton, according to surveillance footage. It had been 9.5 hours since he had last taken a video at the Daleen liquor store. Jason appeared to be acting normally at first, but the inconspicuous gesture caught our attention. Jason appears to be unclean. Jason's shirt and arm are covered in dirt. He seems to be shaking his shoulders at one point. This conduct seems very suspicious. Before leaving the gas station, Jason checks the passenger door before getting into his car and walking back to it. He opens the passenger door once more and slams it shut after 20 seconds. Daleen was the last person to use that door, he said. At last, he takes off in his car. Detectives have developed a new theory after seeing this footage. Their theory is that Dallin took Daleen to a field south of Stockton and, in a hurry, physically pulled her out of the car, causing the front passenger door to jam. Dallin thought that she was dead, but they told her that in order to arrest Jason. Dai Ling was still missing, and Jason was out and about interviewing representatives. The case then underwent a sea change on October 15, 2011, more than 2 months after Dai Ling's disappearance. A farmer made a tragic discovery in a field 20 miles outside of Stockton. According to court documents on the 15th of 2011, human remains, later identified as Daleen, were found in a cornfield approximately 64 feet from Lone Tree Road in the Escalon. That afternoon, senior criminalist Sarah Yoshida of the Department of Justice was sent to the crime scene. A skull, ribs, jaw, vertebrae, and bones from the feet and legs were among the many bones discovered by Yoshida. She also discovered a clump of hair and a human torso. Cases of 522 caliber cartridges were discovered just southeast of the location of the human remains, and a black bra was discovered between the remains and Lawn Road. Dr. Bennett Omalu, the medical examiner for San Joaquin County, arrived at the crime scene at approximately 9 p.m. that evening. He ordered an 18-inch excavation of the ground beneath the body as soon as he saw it. After securing the soil in a body bag and x-raying it, we discovered 222 caliber bullets in the excavated soil. An AUI was conducted on Dayling's remains by Dr. Omalu. He claimed that Daylin was shot in the cornfield where her remains were discovered, and that either the bullets passed through her body and lodged in the ground just beneath her, or they remained inside the body and fell out as it decomposed. In either case, there was a gunshot wound to the backhead. Based on the location of the gunshot wound and the fact that Daylina's fingernails, jewelry, and nails were tangled in her hair, Dr. Dra Omalu believed that when Daylina was shot, she had her hands and fingers wrapped around her head. Omalu came to the conclusion that Daylina's death was caused by a gunshot wound to the head, with gunshot wounds to the trunk also playing a role. Additionally, he believed that her body's decomposition supported her death on August 7, 2011. In the murder of Dayling, investigators had a top suspect. Detectives also found that Jason had access to a Jennings 22.2 semi-automatic handgun that belonged to one of his relatives, according to court documents. The gun's involvement in Daylin's shooting was verified by ballistics testing. Jason Gilley was arrested by authorities when he was eventually taken into custody. On the evening of Saturday, August 6, 2011, Daylin went to a bar to meet some friends, and investigators developed their theory about what happened the night she vanished. Among them was Jason Gilley. Daylin was convinced to come to Jason Gilley's house. On their way to Jason's house, they made a stop at a liquor store. This liquor store is where we last saw Daylina alive. Nothing seemed to be bothering her based on this footage, but after she and Jason left the store, things started to happen that ultimately resulted in her death. Daylina was naked when her body was discovered by investigators. Because of this, authorities concluded that she didn't want to have an intimate relationship with Jason, but he coerced her into doing so. That was the only plausible explanation. Authorities believed that Daylina told Jason that she would report it to the police, so he put her in his car, drove many miles past her home, and then turned into a field where he killed her. However, the body's extreme decomposition made it impossible to verify that theory. Jason Gilley was found guilty of Daylin's murder in November 2013 and given a life sentence without the possibility of release. He made an unsuccessful attempt to appeal the sentence. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On December 3, 1981, Rhonda Casto was born in the tiny Washington town of Gig Harbor. She was raised in a loving, supportive family that encouraged her in everything she did. Rhonda had a bright personality that was evident from a young age. She was driven, ambitious, and tenacious. According to her loved ones, she was able to inspire others and quickly establish a common language with them. When Rhonda graduated from high school, she decided to pursue a career in fashion. She began a modeling career thanks to her charisma, slim build, and inherent beauty. She gradually gained recognition by taking part in photo shoots and small fashion shows. Even though she loved her job, she always hoped for more than cover shots. Rhonda felt that true happiness would come from having a family and kids. We took off right away after she met Stephen Nichols and Nichols in 2009. They were attracted to each other right away after meeting through mutual friends. Although Rhonda's loved ones initially had some reservations about Stephen's age, 15 years older than Rhonda, the couple appeared to be content. Stephen's confidence and attention to detail impressed Rhonda, she told friends. He appeared to be a man she could trust, someone who cared about her. For his part, Stephen found Rhonda's inherent beauty and joy appealing. He viewed her as a companion who could share life's pleasures and challenges with him. They started living together shortly after they started dating, planning their future together. Their relationship took a new turn a few years later. Rhonda learned she was expecting a baby. For her, this news marked the start of a new stage. When tragedy rocked their lives, she was 5 months pregnant. Along with happiness, Rhonda's pregnancy gave her new objectives. She aspired to become a successful mother and keep growing as a person. Stephen seemed happy to be getting ready to become a father, and helped her in every way. The baby would be the pinnacle of their happy life together, he assured his friends. Even though they were very different in age, their relationship appeared to be strong and nothing could stop them from being happy. Rhonda, who always aimed for independence, had faith in Stephen, and genuinely thought he would make a fantastic husband and father. They led busy, active lives. In order to escape the everyday grind, Rhonda frequently encouraged Stephen to take walks because she loved the outdoors. The area's wooded trails, where they could take in the scenery and clean air, were their favorite spots. Eagle Creek, a picturesque location in Oregon renowned for its rocky cliffs and waterfalls, was one such trail. Rhonda frequently recommended the trail for hikes because she loved it. They made the decision to hike Eagle Creek once more on the day of the tragedy. It was supposed to be a pleasant and easy walk. In order to preserve the memories of the happy time leading up to the baby's birth, Rhonda wanted to take some photos against the backdrop of nature, but nobody could have foreseen that Rhonda's walk would be her final one. On March 16, 2009, at approximately 6:30 p.m., Stephen Nichols reported to emergency services that his fiancée, Rhonda Casto, had fallen off a cliff on the Eagle Creek Trail. According to the dispatcher who took the call, Stephen's voice sounded tense and nervous. He tried to explain what had happened in a bewildered tone. "My fiancée went down. She tumbled off a precipice. I'm not sure if she's still alive." In an effort to explain the scene, Stephen repeated himself. He went on to say that Rhonda reportedly lost her balance on one of the challenging parts of the Eagle Creek Trail and fell while they were hiking along it. He informed the dispatcher right away that the situation was serious in a panicked voice. Rescuers arrived at the scene right away, fully aware that the Eagle Creek Trail, despite its popularity among hikers, can be hazardous. Numerous accidents have occurred in the past due to narrow paths, steep slopes, and slippery rocks, but none of the team could have imagined how messy this tragedy would end up being. Stephen was standing at the edge of the cliff when rescuers arrived on the scene. He appeared perplexed. He was obviously in shock, but his clothes were fine. His face showed a mix of horror and despair, and his breathing was labored. Stephen stated that he had attempted to figure out how to get downstairs to assist Rhonda, but had come to the conclusion that it was too risky. She was ahead. "I shouted at her to be careful when rescuers started asking questions, but she didn't listen," he said. "She slipped all of a sudden, and it happened too quickly." However, his words sounded sentimental. Rescuers found certain aspects of his story strange. Since Stephen was unable to pinpoint the precise location of Rhonda's fall and was unsure of her actions at the time, a group of rescuers descended to locate her. The circumstances were challenging. The ground was loose and the slope was steep. The rescuers themselves might have been in danger if they had made the smallest error. They discovered Rhonda's body on a rocky platform at the foot of the cliff. After roughly 40 minutes, it was clear from her stillness that her wounds were incompatible with life. Rescuers had concerns because the location where Rhonda was discovered was a narrow ledge in the middle of a heavily forested slope. The rocks and vegetation there appeared to be unaltered. There were no signs of struggle, ripped branches, or slip marks, which are typically present when someone falls from this height. The rescuers also saw that, despite being steep, the slope itself did not appear to be dangerous enough to cause such a serious tragedy. At the cliff's edge where Stephen said the incident happened, there were no visible signs, such as ripped shoes or indentations in the ground, that would have suggested Rhonda had attempted to cling on. Although it seemed strange, the rescuers concentrated on evacuating the body, which was the primary objective. Stephen was upset when the rescuers came back to tell him about the discovery. There was a mix of confusion and guilt on his face. He restated his version of what had happened. Together they were strolling, conversing, and taking in the scenery. He claimed that Rhonda eventually made the decision to accelerate and run ahead. She loved the outdoors and occasionally got too reckless, according to Stephen. He recalled that, "She didn't seem to listen when I told her to be more cautious. She slipped and fell a few seconds later." According to Stephen, everything happened too quickly for him to take any action. I had nothing to do. With a trembling voice, he added, while recording Stephen's statement, rescuers observed that, in spite of his emotional statements, he appeared somewhat detached. He was acting strangely. He didn't try to approach the cliff's edge, and he didn't seem interested in learning the specifics of what had happened. When the police arrived on the scene, officers started questioning Stephen, which caused the rescuers to have their first reservations. He was still perplexed by certain details, but his story stayed consistent. For instance, he was unable to precisely explain why Rhonda chose to run ahead of her and what transpired just before she fell. Although officers recorded his statement, they pointed out that his explanation sounded too general and lacked specific facts. That was a trail we frequently walked. She knew what she was doing, according to Stephen. It's simply a horrible mishap. Police officers started to question his statements, though, because the accident's specifics did not make sense. Although the tragedy initially seemed to be an accident, rescuers and police were left wondering what actually transpired on the Eagle Creek Trail that day due to Stephen's actions and the details of the scene. Why was it so easy for a physically active woman to lose her balance? And why did the fall site show no typical indications of struggle or slip marks? Although these issues are still unresolved, rescuers and law enforcement chose to conduct additional research in order to learn the whole truth about Rhonda Casto's fate. Numerous questions were raised right away by the Eagle Creek Trail tragedy, and Oregon police, understanding the complexity of the situation. Rhonda Casto's death seemed to be an accident at first, but as the incident's specifics and Stephen Nichols' actions became more apparent, suspicions started to grow. The investigators were aware that the clue was concealed not only at the accident scene, but also in the lives of Rhonda and Stephen. Therefore, every facet of their relationship, as well as any indication of potential conflict or motivation, needed to be carefully examined. The identification of potential witnesses was the first stage of the investigation. Eagle Creek is a well-liked hiking destination, particularly on a day with clear, warm weather. People who were on the trail at the time of the tragedy were contacted by police. Before the incident, Rhonda and Stephen were spotted by a number of hikers. They were strolling together, and nothing about their behavior raised suspicions. According to one hiker, he saw Rhonda because she appeared to be very content. He was following her as she walked ahead. They were giggling. However, he recalled that no witnesses saw the fall occur. Only Stephen was able to determine the truth at that point. Although his explanation for Rhonda's decision to accelerate made sense, police started looking into other possibilities. Stephen Nichols claimed that his fiancée had called rescuers as soon as the incident occurred, tumbled down a precipice. He appeared startled at first, but his actions later started to seem odd. Though Stephen did not show the extreme panic or acute shock that might be anticipated in such a situation, rescuers who arrived on the scene noted that he was emotionally distressed. His actions in the days that followed were even more dubious. Rather than wallowing in grief, Stephen carried on with his routine. He avoided talking to loved ones about the incident and said very little about Rhonda. I found it odd that he almost instantly began acting as if nothing had happened, one of Rhonda's friends recalled. Additionally, police observed that Stephen showed no particular interest in the investigation's specifics. He made no effort to inquire about Rhonda's chances of survival or initiate contact with law enforcement. Rhonda's mother stated that in the days preceding the tragedy, Rhonda expressed her fears of something happening to her, which is why her family did not initially accept the accident version. "It's not an accident, I assure you," she informed her mom. These remarks suggested a potentially tense relationship between Rhonda and Stephen, which made them a crucial component of the inquiry. Additionally, according to Rhonda's mother, their relationship has never been ideal. Rhonda reportedly considered ending her relationship with Stephen, even though they were expecting a child. She complained to friends about her partner's excessive control and jealousy. Because it might have revealed underlying conflicts that contributed to the tragedy, this testimony raised suspicions among investigators. Rhonda appeared tense and anxious in the weeks prior to the incident, according to one of her friends. She expressed her fear for her future. According to him, the version of events that Stephen provided started to diverge from the testimonies that were collected from loved ones. The search of Stephen Nichols' house was a crucial part of the investigation. If the tragedy wasn't an accident, investigators were searching for documents that might provide insight into the couple's relationship and potential motivations. Police discovered a $1 million insurance policy in Rhonda's name during the search. Stephen was listed as the only beneficiary. Since it turned out that the policy had only been issued a few months prior to the tragedy, this document caused a lot of questions for investigators. Furthermore, the insurance company claims that Stephen pushed for clauses in the policy that guaranteed the full amount would be paid, even in the case of an accident. It's likely that Rhonda was unaware of the policy. She never brought up the insurance policy or financial issues with Stephen, according to her friends and family. Given that Stephen was in a precarious financial situation, the fact that such a sizable insurance policy had been taken out just before the tragedy raised police suspicions and might have suggested a financial motivation. To ascertain whether he intended to use the funds to address his issues, investigators started looking through his bank accounts and financial documents. Following Rhonda's passing, Stephen Nichols also displayed odd financial behavior. He immediately began the process of obtaining an insurance policy rather than delaying his affairs. Only a few days after the tragedy, investigators saw that he completed the payout paperwork. His actions appeared hurried, which added to the suspicion. Police also observed that Stephen avoided interacting with Rhonda's relatives. He didn't offer to assist her parents with funeral planning or show up for her memorial service. As a result, there was more friction between him and the grieving family, who were beginning to suspect Stephen of being responsible for her passing. The turning point was when Stephen Nichols, who had appeared distant and reclusive since the tragedy, became the target of law enforcement after they had accumulated enough strong evidence to file charges. Be aware that every piece of evidence, including witness accounts and financial records, pointed to a potential motive, and his odd post-event behavior increased suspicion. Police eventually accused him of murder, and they started questioning him. Given that Stephen might have been tense or dangerous if caught, investigators made sure they were ready for the arrest. They were alarmed by his actions in the last few days. It was a cold and calculating attitude toward the situation, not just emotional distress from the loss. Based on the evidence they discovered, insurance, financial records, and his peculiar behavior, the police took Stephen into custody at his residence. There were no problems during the arrest procedure. When Stephen was told of the charges, he reacted calmly. He wasn't hostile, made no harsh remarks, or attempted to flee. There was nothing that could surprise him when police told him he was accused of murder. His face was unbreakable. The first interrogation started after Stephen was taken to the police station. He initially flatly denied any guilt. He asserted that his version of events would remain unchanged when questioned about what had transpired. "I was unable to save Rhonda when she fell. An accident occurred." He persisted in claiming that he was unable to foresee the tragedy and that the incident was an accident. But even though he was certain of his innocence, investigators started to show him evidence that contradicted his account. The police attempted to approach the case more subtly in an attempt to persuade Stephen to confess, rather than immediately accusing him of murder. His own words were being used against him as they meticulously crafted his story. Stephen became anxious during one of the interviews after the investigators presented him with financial records and other supporting documentation. Following the tragedy, police insisted that his actions were out of the ordinary. They highlighted his rash insurance buying decisions, his odd conduct following Rhonda's passing, and other questionable incidents. When an investigator asked Stephen why he had started taking out insurance so quickly, it was a pivotal moment. The man smiled nervously and said something that was practically a confession. "I didn't think it would happen so fast," he said, not seeing right away that what he said might have been taken as an admission of his actual motivations. It was a crucial statement that provided the police with a crucial lead. Although Stephen persisted in claiming that the tragedy was an accident, his arguments started to falter. "You're saying you didn't expect it to end so quickly," the investigator persisted. "You mean you didn't believe Rhonda would pass away?" Since more investigation showed that psychological pressure was a factor, this incident gave the impression that Stephen may have eventually acknowledged his guilt, even if not outright. Perhaps unknowingly, Stephen started to give in to the weight of the evidence. He grew more reclusive, avoiding direct responses and questions about his behavior on the day of the tragedy, even though he had no intention of acknowledging what had happened. In the meantime, the investigators engaged experts and kept elaborating on specifics. Rhonda died from injuries that were obviously not possible to have resulted from an unintentional fall, according to the forensic report. Because of the severe impact that caused these injuries, investigators started to believe that Stephen was most likely to blame for her passing. But in spite of everything, Stephen refused to acknowledge his actions. He repeated his version of events, claiming that he had no idea what was going to happen and that everything had happened by accident. The police understood that gathering reliable evidence would require time and effort, making this a challenging case. In the end, investigators collected all the evidence required for charging. In addition to Stephen's own actions in the days that followed, they also incorporated forensic evidence, Rhonda's insurance policy, documents proving Stephen was the only beneficiary, testimony from her family and friends, and proof of financial motivations. The tragedy served as a crucial component of the inquiry as well. The fact that he processed the insurance payment without hesitation and without displaying the typical human response to losing a loved one astounded the investigators. As a result, the charges had a solid foundation thanks to all of these facts, and the investigation took the case to trial. The trial of Stephen Nichols marked the end of a protracted investigation into Rhonda Casto's unexplained death on the Eagle Creek Trail. Investigators and prosecutors developed a case that they felt demonstrated the tragedy was not an accident. After years of meticulous work, the trial's unexpected conclusion, however, caused a public uproar and raised numerous concerns about the true circumstances surrounding Stephen Nichols' 2015 arrest. According to the investigation, the woman's death was the result of deliberate actions. Prosecutors asserted with confidence that Nichols had a purpose, a plan, and the intention to carry it out. A $1 million insurance policy that was put in Rhonda's name just months before she passed away was a crucial component of the prosecution's case. Stephen was listed as the policy's only beneficiary. The prosecution claimed that the document suggested a possible financial motivation for the crime. Prosecutors also emphasized Rhonda's mother's testimony, claiming that her daughter had voiced concerns about Stephen's unpredictable behavior and had been vocal about the possibility that she might be abused if something were to happen to her. You are aware it's no coincidence. According to the mother, Rhonda stated in court that her injuries were not totally consistent with an unintentional fall. Prosecutors also provided a medical report supporting this claim. The medical examiners came to the conclusion that rather than a simple loss of balance, Rhonda's injuries might indicate a push. The prosecution's case revolved around these conclusions. From the start, Stephen Nichols vehemently denied his guilt. According to his attorneys, Rhonda's death was a tragic but unintended accident. According to Stephen's own account, he and Rhonda were taking a leisurely stroll along the wharf on the day of the tragedy. According to him, Rhonda was feeling good and even decided to pick up the pace in order to feel more liberated and energetic. But she reportedly stumbled and fell off a cliff on one challenging part of the trail. It happened too quickly, but I saw her lose her balance. I was powerless to help. According to Nichols, he also maintained that the accusations against him were the result of speculation and misinterpretation. His attorneys argued that the investigation had rushed to conclusions based on emotional testimony from the deceased's family members and circumstantial evidence. Additionally, the defense argued that married couples, particularly those who were getting ready to move in together and were expecting a child, frequently had insurance policies. They maintained that the execution of such a document did not demonstrate criminal intent, and that its mere existence did not establish that Stephen had harmed Rhonda on purpose. The attorneys stressed that Nichols had no established reason for the murder because, despite their occasional arguments, their relationship was not so tumultuous as to result in tragedy. There were several obstacles that prosecutors had to overcome in order to construct a perfect prosecution. The absence of first-hand witnesses was one of the main issues. Stephen was the only one who witnessed Rhonda's fall on the trail. Nichols's attorneys had a significant advantage because no one could definitively dispute their client's version of events, allowing him to continue insisting on it. The unclear expert conclusions were another flaw in the prosecution's case. There were no other obvious indications of violence. Even though some of Rhonda's wounds weren't consistent with the fall, this ambiguity was actively exploited by defense lawyers. They maintained that the prosecution's conclusions were based on speculation and conjecture, and that Rhonda's death was an accident. Stephen Nichols chose to reach an agreement with prosecutors in 2017, 2 years after his arrest. This ruling was an unanticipated development in the case. Nichols' degree of responsibility and potential sentence were greatly diminished by the agreement, which assumed that he would enter a guilty plea to manslaughter. In turn, the prosecutor's office accepted the agreement, likely understanding that the likelihood of a conviction on the manslaughter count was lower. A strong defense, unclear medical reports, and a lack of concrete evidence might have led to Nichols's acquittal. As part of the agreement, a plea deal in this case permitted at least partial justice. Although it was not his intention, Nichols acknowledged that his actions on the day of the tragedy might have played a role in Rhonda's demise. The public and the victim's family had differing opinions about this admission, which allowed the prosecution to wrap up the case without a drawn-out trial. The court imposed the sentence after the plea agreement. Stephen Nichols received a 3-year probationary sentence after being found guilty of manslaughter. Nevertheless, the court permitted Nichols to depart following his 19-month incarceration pending trial. Many people who had been following the case, including Rhonda's family, were taken aback by this light sentence. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.